General Plan Update Committee meeting. And can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Vice Mayor Solarsano,
Here.
Commissioner Benefield,
Here.
and Commissioner Van Antwerp.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Now it's time for public comment on items not on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll close public comment period. And we'll go to item number 3 on the agenda, which is review and approval of the minutes from the December 16th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes. A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Okay.
Obnoxious?
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll go to a summary and discussion of public comment which has been received on the draft coastal land use plan, general plan. And we'll turn it over to staff to lead that discussion.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Councilmember Clark and committee members, and thank you for meeting with us tonight to go over the draft general plan update. I wanted to do a real brief reminder, since it's been a while since we've met, of the players and the roles for this project. So Megan and I are with CDD, we're in long-range planning, and we report to Nick Bobroff. And we have consultants from WSP. We did not bring the consultants to this meeting, but they are working in the background on these documents, and they'll be preparing the program EIR for this project. And then the committee's role is to continue to give us input and direction on the draft documents, advise us as we proceed, and allow these check-ins not only between us and the committee, but with the public in mind. And we already went through the agenda tonight a little bit. We already covered some of this, but now we're going to go into our staff report, and we're going to summarize key comments that were received on the draft general plan, and what our response or recommendation is on those comments. And our thought was that after each element, we could also take public comment if it pleases your committee, and we can kind of address it one element at a time. And we'll welcome then discussion or deliberation as we go through. I also wanted to give a quick background and context again on this plan, because I know there's so many pieces to it, and then there's other pieces that are not part of the plan but are related. And so wanted to give a broad overview that this all began with initiation in 2015, and this project began in earnest in 2017. It commenced with public surveys, workshops, and GPU committee meetings. And substantial progress was made on the technical side, including stakeholder reviews and all of that, before it was paused during the pandemic. So work resumed again in late 2023, and last year we went through the draft elements with your committee. We received feedback, and then we conducted a formal public comment period in June to August of this year, which included a workshop on July 8th. And we received approximately 35 comment letters, as well as a good number of verbal comments. And with all of that said, I wanted to also point out that nonetheless, this is still going to be a draft plan as we proceed through the next steps. So this gives you an idea of where we are in the process. So what I just said about 2024, where we engaged with your committee, and then we had a draft plan in spring, summer of this year. Right now, we're right here. And after we get a little bit of clarification on the draft plan, then we intend to begin with the program EIR. And we need a stable project description for that EIR, and that's why we really want to clarify some things now. But by no means does that mean the plan will then be written in stone. So when we go through the EIR process, things will become apparent that will probably also result in changes, and we'll have different alternatives in the EIR. And after that EIR and public input process, we'll check in again and make sure that we have a clear recommendation for going forward. And then the Planning Commission and City Council will still have input before the plan becomes final. So we want to get it right, but at the same time, we want to just note that nothing is getting etched in stone yet. So with that, I'll go ahead and dive into the public comments that we received and our staff report. With the land use element, we got, this slide provides a brief summary, but we received comments including that the Bluffs properties should not be designated for planned unit development, or PUD. Concerns that the jobs housing data appeared to be inaccurate, questions about how to accommodate future planned housing, whether there's potential for a housing trust fund and additional social justice considerations. We got requests for more maps and visuals to be included in this element, including a map of city-owned properties, zoning overlays and zoning, visuals of the ridge lines, housing capacity to be shown, and infrastructure capacity. And we were asked to have creative parking solutions and discussion of cannabis impacts on the city in this element. So staff's thoughts on these comments. The Chevron property in particular, it was chosen to have the PUD designation applied to it in the early part of this project. And then in late 2019 and early 2020, the GPU committee agreed that that's what should be applied going forward, as it's got a lot of flexibility for potential development or non-development. But moreover, I would say that staff recommends that the PUD designation still be applied, at least for the purposes of the EIR and having the most reasonable worst-case impact project as the analyzed project. And then we intend to have reduced alternatives in the EIR that look at less impacted designations. So when we move forward to have a defensible EIR, you have to have a proposed project and reduced alternatives. And we intend to have a reasonable range of reduced alternatives that analyze other things like open space recreation for the Chevron property, as well as leaving the ag properties in agriculture rather than having housing. And so we want to have that nice, good range and get public input on it. And then that way we can move forward with a best recommendation that the city council can choose that would, they would have options rather than being stuck with one thing. And then on the Tea Time property, we can consider also reduced alternatives, but there are applications for development already on the Tea Time property, and so change of designation probably wouldn't change that unless those applications were withdrawn. So moving forward, our recommendation is to have it be PUD for the purpose of moving forward.
Ask you a question, and just to know if it's legal or allowed, to put a designation on the property that's to be announced, like a placeholder, like say a specific plan would be required or something like. Can you do that sort of thing, or do you have to give it a land use?
It's strongly recommended that you do give it a land use under state general plan requirements, to leave it kind of like a gap, unless there, you can refer to some other plan that covers it, which in this case, we really wouldn't be able to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll go through our other responses, but then I'm going to stop on this slide and make sure I cover any other questions that you have, and then we could possibly also take public input on it. So on the jobs housing data, we did use recent census information, and our consultants went through also and did parcel by parcel analysis, and it very closely matched the census information. So it is our contention that the jobs housing data in the land use element is very accurate and up to date. On the housing capacity, I'll just note that it shows a lot of capacity for future development, including housing, but with a general plan, it's customary to show a lot of capacity, but you don't expect that it's all going to get built out within the next 20 years. So some projects will develop and others won't. And so, again, we want to have a reasonable worst-case scenario for analysis, and then we want to work with our decision makers to come up with a final map. But it shouldn't be considered that every single thing will be built out as shown on the map. The 2003 general plan is 20 years old, and it has never been built out. On the Housing Trust Fund, that is something that is being considered, but it's tied to our housing element, which was updated earlier this year, and it is a part of the general plan, but it's not part of the general plan update since it's on its own timelines by state law. And then for social justice policies, we've tried to cover those policies and programs in the healthy community element rather than in the land use element. As far as the maps and visuals, we can add more maps and visuals if you direct. We would say that for city-owned properties, we can add that, but it would be a snapshot of what's today, so it could fall out of date quickly. We would not recommend adding a zoning map or any of the zoning overlays to the general plan. In fact, that's one of the first things we plan to update after the general plan does get approved, is to update all the zoning. One thing we could do is have like a stable website link where the zoning maps are, and we could reference that in the general plan. And then for visuals of ridge lines, we kind of cover that in figure LU1, which I'll show in just a moment. And trying to show housing capacity, again, we try and show that in the housing element. And for infrastructure capacity, again, that is kind of a snapshot. We talked a little bit about this last year with like water availability. And we intend to analyze that in more depth through the EIR process. And then there was a call for creative parking solutions in this element, and we think we somewhat touch on that in the circulation element, and we'll get to that later in the presentation. And we can talk more about cannabis growing impacts, but we think that this can be covered better in the EIR. We also have some policies tied to that with LU4A and LU4B about coordinating on cannabis impacts. And I'll just show the maps real quick. So this is LU1, and it has a topographic underlay here, and you can see the upper part of the ridge lines up here. So we're trying to show topography, but we welcome any input on that. And then this, again, is the land use designations map, and this shows the Chevron and tea time here. And this shows the two agricultural parcels that would change under the most impactive project. So with that, I thought I would pause there and see what questions you have and if you'd like to take public comment on this first part.
All right, any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question about one of the comments that we've heard a lot about has been concern with the Chevron Properties PUD. Can you explain again, because this is something I didn't initially understand, what are the benefits to having the PUD and not only allowing for open space to be in that parcel?
I'll start, and then Nick might have more insights because he was here when that got discussed a few years back. But what's nice about the PUD designation is that it's very general, and it does call for a specific plan. So to Commissioner Benefield's question earlier, it requires that any development come in and with discretion and make a specific plan with proper buffers and setbacks and height. And so it's very flexible.
What did you say, in density?
Oh, and with the density for review. So it's a very flexible, it's the most flexible designation in our current general plan and going forward, and it would align with what the tea time parcel is designated as also. So it would allow for us to look at it as potentially built and impacted for purpose of analysis, but at the same time, if it were to be finalized that way with that designation, it would allow for discretion for projects that came forward in the future. But again, we want to analyze some other alternatives too, which, depending on what unfolds in the next couple of years as Chevron begins decommissioning, there may be other things that emerge that become more apparent that the city council will want to apply there.
And just for clarification, I'm not sure, the idea of the reduced alternatives and all that, can you give examples of what those would be so that people, because from what I understand, if we didn't have the PUD, then there could be an issue with not having enough alternative options for that, which could put the city in potentially legal difficulties. Can you just reiterate that for anybody who's listening who might want a refresher of that?
Certainly. So that is a CEQA requirement with your environmental impact report that your proposed project, it just says you have to analyze a proposed project, but then you absolutely have to analyze reduced alternatives that would potentially reduce impacts. And so if we start with our proposed project being the most reduced or the least impactive, then it puts us in a bind because then we have to come up with alternatives that reduce it further, and then we start to paint ourselves into a corner. And so you don't want to start off with, okay, let's just build everything and cover the whole map with high density, but you want a reasonable build-out scenario. And then you want to draw from that reduced alternatives that you can analyze and choose from. And a lot of people think that you cannot choose from those alternatives, but in fact you can. And our decision makers at the end, we hope to bring them a recommendation, but then they will have full discretion to pick the map and the designations that they vote on.
So that even if there is a build-out plan or option, not plan, sorry, option, that doesn't mean that that's where we're going to end up going in terms of that property.
Exactly.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that for anybody who was as confused as I was initially when I was learning about it. So thank you.
I have a question. You're probably going to say, haven't you figured this out yet? But I haven't. So,
Is your microphone on?
yeah.
Okay.
Let me shout. Why in the friggin' world do we need an EIR for a general plan when actually it is the impetus for projects, and we could examine the project under an EIR? I probably know the answer to this, but it just seems like a lot of extra work for small relief,
That's a valid question. If what we were doing was a small general plan amendment, there's a chance that we could say we don't need a full EIR, or we could even apply a narrow exemption or a narrow CEQA document to it. But because it's citywide and all the policies we have, they do have potential for future impacts. The most defensible thing we could do is to have a program EIR that looks at it from that 30,000-foot level and analyzes the overall impacts, and then looks at how the policies maybe reduce those impacts, maybe they increase those impacts. But it's not only important to do it just to comply with CEQA and to be defensible in any future challenge, but what's also really great is that we can then rely on that EIR for our future programs. So when we do go in and we do the parking update, and we decide there was a mention of creative parking solutions, and then there's a action item to study and consider parking solutions, we'll be able to simply say, well, we talked about that already and it's in our EIR, so we won't have to keep doing new CEQA documents for everything that we implement in the future, including the housing rezones and all of that.
I'd just add, and maybe Mindy can elaborate on this, but in the context of a general plan, the mitigation measures that you would prepare as part of an EIR take on a little bit of a different form, right? The mitigation measures end up being the policies themselves. And so maybe out of the EIR process, where you pick, if the decision makers end up picking a reduced alternative, right, that may be down zones, if you will, let's say, the Chevron property, just for argument's sake, then with that's going to come revised policies that are maybe more protective of that resource or further limit development. And so it's a little bit different from the types of EIRs that we're accustomed to seeing for like a housing project or something like that. It's similar concept, but just it's implemented in a kind of higher level, more general way.
Just one addition, I won't beat this to death, but did anybody sue about this? Did anybody say, we don't want to do an EIR, we can do this as a,
No, nobody made that challenge.
should have.
I know there was an EIR for the 2003 general plan, and there were some potential challenges back then, and they all got resolved in the final, but the EIR, having it coupled with the plan, made it much more defensible.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, actually, I have, mainly it's a comment, and it is getting back to the Chevron and the tea time designation for PUD. I understand the flexibility. But this is 30 years of community feedback on the bluffs and preserving the bluffs. It's generational. My parents were part of that. I'm part of it. My kids are part of it. And as much as I understand the designation, the preferred designation for those areas is PUD, I think they should be open space recreation. I think we show that in our community. We show that in the seal. We show that in the new logo that I know has been talked about at the last meeting. It's about preservation, and that's one area that I, for one, feel very strongly. I think other people do too, and I noticed in all of the comments there were quite a few folks and organizations that felt the same way. So I'm still having a hard time with being okay with that PUD land use designation. And the general plan is the Constitution for our land. That really is the governing document. And that's for the next 20 years.
But the only problem is we haven't yet had the range of alternatives for all the public input. So we haven't really gotten all the public input yet, including the property owners themselves. So this is definitely going to still be available to you as decision makers when it comes to you for finalization. You'll be able to choose from those alternatives.
I'm still seeing it as land use designation, that it should be OSR. I understand the alternatives. Could OSR be, I'm just possibility thinking here, but a primary scenario in the EIR as opposed to secondary, or what do you think?
I wish it could, but under CEQA, you cannot do that. It has to be the most impactive as the proposed project. But these other alternatives are still going to be on the table.
Could you have that as an alternative?
Yes, that's our intention.
Yes.
Is that, and, either an open space designation for the entirety of the Chevron facility, or for some large proportion of it would be a reduced alternative. That's the intention, is right. For the purposes of preparing the EIR, we select effectively, for lack of a better term, right, kind of the most intensive, realistic scenario of, some sort of full development across the site. And then you can have any number of reduced alternatives, right? You can have one that is do absolutely nothing, leave it just the way it is, which is essentially the no project alternative, where it continues to stay a defunct oil and gas facility. You can have a reduced alternative where the entirety of it gets designated open space recreation. You could have a hybrid reduced alternative where certain portions of the Chevron facility get proposed to be designated as open space, and some other pieces of it that are maybe less sensitive, like the nursery parcel up on Carpinteria Avenue, maybe is appropriate for some kind of infill development, right? So we're not limited really to the number of alternatives that we want to consider. We'll pick a few, sort of benchmarks within the spectrum to provide as kind of, guidepost or milepost, if you will. But even then, the decision makers can still say, hey, I like, some of what alternative 1 has to say, and I like some of what alternative 3 has to say, and I'm going to mix those up and create a brand new hybrid, and that's the one that we want to move forward with.
And the most important thing about that is that it's all been analyzed in the EIR, at least the worst case impact. So then the decision makers will have a menu to choose from, and they won't be hampered by the fact that we didn't analyze any development.
Right, so we can choose a less impactful overall alternative than what's studied in the EIR, but we can't go the other way, right? We can't propose to do the least impactful thing and then say, you know what, in hindsight, we want to do something more intensive than what we thought we wanted to do. We can't do that without going back and doing a brand new EIR or a supplemental EIR. So you can down zone or decrease the intensity of what you intend to develop throughout the city, but you can't go the other way. So that's why we kind of have to start at this, quote unquote worst case scenario, and then through the development alternatives, whittle it down to where we eventually want to land.
Yeah, it does, though, still gives a developer mindset.
Yeah, and some of that reflects, right, the at the time, going back 10, 11 years, whenever it was that we started this process, some of what was going into that decision to consider the site for PUD was that we didn't know exactly what the community wanted to do with the area. It's, 55 acres or thereabouts. It's a lot of area. Some of it's more sensitive than others. Some of it's fully developed and paved over currently if you go out there. Other parts of it are, more or less untouched and function as de facto habitat. So we didn't know, what the community wanted to do with it. We didn't have, a clear vision for it. I still don't think we do. And we also recognized that potentially it's one of our last pieces of property of any significant size where we could accommodate more housing if or when we decide that that's what we wanted to do with it. Right, recognizing, for example, the RENA housing mandates, where we're being told we have to plan for this much housing. This cycle, it's 900 units. Next cycle, who knows what it'll be? So we were trying to anticipate and plan for and reserve some capacity to meet future needs, not knowing exactly what those will be, but wanting to not put all of our eggs in one basket of saying, nope, this will be all open space in perpetuity, and we're just going to have to find somewhere else to meet our housing needs. The other part of it was at the time, and I don't know if this is still, something that the committee agrees with, but at the time we had one member on the GPUC who was very concerned about future risk from sea level rise and anticipating that there will come a time, perhaps in the life of this general plan, that we would need to start planning for managed retreat of the beach neighborhood. And so then we're effectively not only planning for the need for new housing, but also maybe needing a plan for where replacement housing could go in the city. And at the time, that one GPUC committee member, who's no longer on the committee, was very much in favor of looking at the Chevron site as perhaps a repository, if you will, of where those displaced housing units could be picked up or relocated to. Is that realistic? I don't know. Is that going to happen in this general plan cycle? I don't know, but that was some of what went into it at the time.
Thank you. I don't think that's a great area. If we're talking about sea level rise and bluffs erosion, that would not be the area. And there must be other areas that we can look at to satisfy our RENA goals. But thank you.
Yes,
One more thing, I think it is imperative that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, which would be zoning it open space. And even though it's a great idea, we may encounter something that nobody's invented yet that we want there. I mean, you can't limit yourself when so many inventions are coming up, but also the laws that we have to apply to, which I think is secondary, because they are so hateful to small cities. But I think you need to have a range to pick from. I agree with you.
We'll open up the public.
Well, actually, I just wanted to do a follow-up to that one. I think what makes me feel comfortable understanding absolutely the concerns and the public feedback we've gotten about wanting to keep that open space, or wanting to have that be designated open space, I like that the PUD doesn't preclude that eventuality. So we might end up in that place anyway, but this just gives us some wiggle room while we're deciding what eventually is going to go there. So I think that's what makes me feel a little bit better about it. That's why I appreciate you kind of walking through why we need these alternatives and how that's going to actually protect our ability to potentially have open space in that property in the future.
Okay, thank you. Wait, in a sense, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I'd like to open the public comment period, hear from the public, and then we can do the wrap-up discussion, if that's...
By section then? Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Patrick O'Connor.
Thank you, Council and Planning Commission and staff. A couple comments on the very subject that we're talking about, the Chevron parcel. I would politely challenge, I think we've painted some black and white pictures here about just how much of a corner we're painting ourselves into. What I heard was that you could issue a conditional or a amendment to the EIR or a new EIR. So you're actually not painted into a corner. You just got to paint yourself out of the corner. The other thing I would point out is I think the notion of this being somehow a jeopardy, by putting in PUD creates some sort of jeopardy, or not putting PUD creates some sort of jeopardy. I'd like to question that. I mean, does our plan not get approved because we've got a lower, band of alternatives from open space to something else? So I think we've just kind of done a real black and white painting here, and I don't think it's that black and white. And certainly, the analogy would be we've created a bit of an island here, and I'm not sure who's on the island. Is it the property owners and the developers that want this alternative, or is it the community that really doesn't? Seems like there's a groundswell on that doesn't want it, and there's a small part that's on the island. So let's just make sure we're reading the room. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Amrita Psalm?
I had a few concerns regarding this particular element, but some general. It is? Turn it off? Oh, okay. Just the many comments that came in, I counted that we had 36 comments, of which 3 people sent in comments twice, and a number of organizations. And I think many of the comments were not addressed in the 10-page response. And it makes me wonder if our first priority, we've been told the first priority of the city is to get more public participation and to have transparency. And I don't know why people should send their comments in if their comments are not going to be fully addressed. And that concerns me. I wanted to know about the Chevron property. Who would be responsible for removing any of the toxicity that might be there? I just saw the movie The Cost of Silence yesterday about what happened with the Deep Horizon project and how many people ended up suffering. I know a number of people who live on Calais Pacific, which is fairly close to Chevron, who have died of cancer or have leukemia. I think the city would be in for a lot of lawsuits, but maybe not. I don't know how they determine that. And when you talk about reduced alternatives, so if we have to list multiple alternatives under each one of those areas, like under each land use designation, do we list multiple alternatives? And if so, are they listed in the most difficult or most affected or the least affected? And how do we meet our RENA requirements if we don't in fact build out? You're saying that the last general plan, we didn't build out on a lot of those things. So if we tell the state, yes, this is what we have, this is our housing element, our housing element is approved, then what happens if we actually don't build out and we don't meet that requirement? So the report told us last month that we're going to have 4,000 something new homes, possibly. That's a little concerning. And I'm still concerned about the whole idea of the shall and the should. I know we've had an explanation in your report. I just don't think it makes it possible for the city to enforce what they're trying to do. If the general plan is the basic plan, or as Alexandra said, is the, like our Constitution, and then we have the zoning, and then we have all the other things, how do we actually enforce it and at the same time have opportunities and alternatives? I mean, as Patrick said, are we thinking about the developers or are we thinking about the residents? Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita. Next speaker slip is Catherine Salant, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Before I start talking, I would just like to say that this is the first time I've had my arm in a sleeve in 6 weeks, that I was hit by a bicycle on the 8th Street end of the 8th Street Bridge, that there are signs that say no bicycles on the bridge, you're supposed to walk it. I have seen in the years that I've lived here, one person walk it. I've made people walk it. It's not very well policed. Moving right along. I have a couple of things. One is about the land use map, and you were saying that the rezoning may change, city-owned parcels may change, housing may change, and then you noted that you could have a link to a city link that would show the updated changes. So I suggest that you incorporate that, and you specifically have maps that show the recently rezoned parcels. So there are 9 so far. There were another 9, I believe, that were identified that may come up again. So you have one for that. Then you have another that owns city-owned property, and you have another one. And why do I suggest that? Because I suspect now and in the future, a lot of discussion about those parcels and what might be put on them. For example, housing. The third one is for housing, and you were saying there are more than 4,000 new units could be built in CARP, which I find astounding and staggering, and an increase of 72% in our town. But to the point, you're saying those may change, but I feel like that's a perfect thing that should be in this map that you could see with a link, so you can update it periodically and people can see. Then the next thing about the zoning area, and you talk about the, excuse me for a second here. You talk, there's the ridge line, the planning area, and then you talk about the boundary goes to the prominent ridge line, which is the first time I've ever heard this mentioned. Nothing is shown on the map. So just looking at the map, it's kind of hard to figure out. In your presentation, it appeared that you did have what you were pointing to. In fact, the planning area went beyond it. So I think that it would be very helpful to identify them, but also, I think even more to the point, it would be very helpful for people reading this, and I think that making it the more user-friendly as possible will get people to read it more. Have a photograph, show the view that we see every day of the mountains from here, and on the photograph point out, this is the prominent ridge, and these are the intermediate ones. And just make it clear. I think a picture says 1,000 words. I'm not quite sure if we are supposed to go on and talk about other things, but in the community design.
No, we're gonna cover that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I would
later.
like to come
Yeah,
back
yeah.
and say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we'll see you
A
again.
few comments.
Thank you. Mike Wondolowski.
I'm Mike, speaking on behalf of Carpinteria Valley Association. First, I just want to say that staff did an outstanding job collating the comments and organizing them by section and summarizing them. I agree that there's a question of the comments that weren't listed here because they were kind of minor details. There's kind of a question of how do those get addressed, or are they addressed? But overall, doing that in just 10 pages is an outstanding effort, so kudos to staff on that one. One relatively small point that wasn't in the staff report, wasn't addressed in the staff report, was the section that mentioned the value of short-term rentals, saying they're an important source of county transit occupancy tax revenue, period. That is not valid to leave hanging the benefit. They also take away long-term housing. And so if you're going to say what the benefit is, and there's a note in passing, it's not a policy, but it's a note in passing. If you're going to say what the benefit is, you have to say what the expense is. And the expense is we lose long-term housing, which is a way bigger loss than the TOT tax we get. So either, we recommend either remove the statement about the benefits TOT, or add that, add the statement, ... although it reduces long-term housing stock. I appreciate staff going and further analyzing the jobs housing balance numbers and confirming that the data they had was good, and that what was in the city's consultant-provided economic profile was fatally flawed, as was suspected, but they proved that that was the case. Finally, and that was the only data in that report that was in that category. Finally, on the PUD on the Bluff 0 and Bluffs 1, it's a tough issue. I'm hearing disagreement about the details of how we get the process, and general agreement on we probably don't want to cover Bluff 0 and Bluffs 1 with houses or commercial operations. I'll note that the PUD designation is defined as documented in the draft update as primarily for residential use. Other things are allowed, even instead of residential, but it says that that area is intended primarily for residential use. And that is not true for the entirety of Bluff 0 and Bluffs 1. It's potentially valid to consider that true for parts of Bluff 0 and Bluffs 1. Therefore, we would recommend that we look at the highest density alternative, the project description, to be the hybrid description as staff mentioned as a possibility that includes some PUD or residential or whatever, but specifically excludes the core of Bluffs 1, the tea time property, and other appropriate areas that should always remain in open space as open space. Right now, that's preserved by our policies in the general plan about views and so on. Those are all subjective standards that are not really worth a whole lot with the state laws that are being passed now. But maybe the zoning would be a higher level of protection. We all know what we want. We want the middle of Bluffs 1 not to be developed. Many of us want the rest of Bluffs 1 not developed. But even a bigger set of us want the middle not developed. Along Carpinteria Avenue, maybe that's appropriate. So that's something to consider. It still provides a range of alternatives, and with the high intensity alternative not being PUD across the entire parcel, both parcels, but something less. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Nathan Pratt, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're up.
Well, okay.
We're doing each section at a time, so you've checked a couple.
What section are you on?
We're only doing land use right now.
Okay.
Later we'll do the other one you picked.
All right. Well, I guess following up on land use, I don't have any documents here with identifying features, but if you're talking about the driving range property,
Yes.
which obviously is the concern for everyone probably, I think, I've been thinking about it. I have a heavy background in real estate and development, and if you want to keep that open space and at the same time perhaps avoid litigation from property owners, if you keep it as a residential property and you develop, let's say, the street side of the property, basically the actual driving range section of it, and can save that for future affordable housing, I think you'd hit a couple birds with one stone. You'd have a potential future low-income housing or affordable housing. At the same time, you would save the view shed from the trail side looking back to the mountains, which is what people are, I think, primarily concerned about, in addition to other things in developing that property. I don't know how you guys would deal with that, with zoning issues, or how it all plays out. I don't have the codes in front of me. I just kind of walked into this cold. But I think the zoning on that property, just previously looking at it, seems so wide-ranging. What could be put in there? There's way too many loopholes. You need to narrow that down and focus it. And I think really, if the city would take the angle that the long-term use would be for saving it for potential affordable housing, And otherwise, don't build it. And I think that putting, obviously, a luxury resort is beyond what I think anyone's interested in doing right now. So that was my 2 cents on that. And then I have a whole thing about, and I don't know if you guys are involved at all with the bike path issue, which if that fits in any land use issue, but that was another thing I was concerned about in addition to the historic district.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll bring it back.
I believe there's a couple of people on Zoom, or at least one.
Anybody else want to speak? I got all the speaker slips.
Zoom.
Oh, Zoom, sorry.
Yes, we do have one speaker on Zoom. Okay, Patrick, you should be allowed to speak now.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, little one came down with the fever. I fully intended to be there this evening, but Patrick Crook speaking on behalf of Citizens for the Carpinteria Bluffs. So we did issue a 6-page letter, which I'm assuming all of you have seen and received, and do appreciate everybody's comments tonight. Really tough subjects here on the Bluffs and Chevron properties. I know folks have, more specifically speaking to Chevron as a whole, but I can count 6 different properties there. And so again, I mean, I think I do appreciate Nick and Mindy and Megan, taking the time to look through our letter and have some feedback and dialogue there on the process going forward. I mean, myself, I think it gets tricky when we're really looking at EIR level document to really hash these things out. But I won't beat a dead horse too much here. I'm assuming you guys have seen our letter and we can get into it in more detail. But I tend to agree with Nick in the thought that there's a lot of wisdom in going through the process. And I think for us, there's big concern in the PUD designation for the existing tea time parcel, which, we're looking at however many units proposed out there and realizing that this is a forward-thinking process on going forward, but really recognizing that PUD designation is a relic of the past if we're to really truly recognize what the community has voiced over and over again with the different projects that have come forward. Unfortunately, we have never got a developer to go forward and actually produce a EIR because of the community's sentiment to not see those projects go forward. So I think I would just point again to the resources that we're really focusing on the visual resources, the biological resources, the cultural resources that are all going to show up in an EIR. So having kind of that background in play, I assume the alternatives will get us there. Also recognizing this is, a lengthy couple-year process to get through this and hopefully get a lot more community feedback and understanding. But for what we're looking at, I think there's a lot of language in there that we would still like to see going more to an objective rather than the should and keeping it subjective. So again, I'll just point to the letter and I can reissue it if you guys haven't had a chance to read through those. But do appreciate staff's time and moving through that stuff and having this meeting tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
There is no one else on Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I'll bring it back to the council, and I'll just say one thing before we get started, is that, this is the general plan is not a project. It's general guidelines, and, as was said, we still had the same large number of houses facing us in the 2003 update, and yet this is what we've got. We didn't get those, and it's okay to say that that's the build out because it's as much as you mathematically can get. But you have a long career ahead of you fighting each and every project that comes down the line, and that's just going to happen regardless. But in terms of In terms of the bluffs, I mean, it's always had what I would think is an unfavorable zoning. I've been for complete open space ever since 1985 and been fighting it ever since. So it's, the zoning didn't really impact the fact that we saved 3/4 of it, or that somehow we're able to save Bluffs 3. That they all had its zoning, but the will of the people won out, and that can happen again. I would say that I think if you want open space, the next best designation is PUD, because in PUD, it requires that you cluster development in favor of open space, and it actually says that. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility in that zoning, but mostly the most important part is that the PUD zoning gives you the opportunity for a specific plan, and so that's when you can do the real work. So this isn't just because something's in the general plan is not the end of the story. There's always hearings coming up. I mean, I completely agree with everything you're saying, but it's not the end of the world that it's a PUD zoning, just in my opinion. Anyway, go ahead. And who would like to talk?
I mean, I don't think I have much else to add besides the questions and follow-up that we had earlier, so, but I agree with what you just said right now, in terms of the concerns with the PUD specifically.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's dedicated people out there, we got a shot at this, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll move on to the next element then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, community design. We received comments that included a request to strengthen the view protection policies from should to shall, and to protect broad or panoramic views of mountains, oceans, and islands, to add an historic downtown or old town overlay district with architectural style requirements, and to prioritize adoption of the design guidelines for Subarea 4, which is the Northeast. And so staff's review, the subjective topics, which really community design is mostly subjective, it typically requires some permissive language, the should language. Additional view protection, though, is also stipulated in the zoning ordinance, where it gets a little more specific under the zone for development standards, so I'll point that out. And the overall argument of should versus shall, I also am going to address later in the presentation. Any given policy, though, like this is what we went through last year, as we went through element by element, and we did look at the policies and which ones needed to be changed to shall. So we did a lot of that work, but we can still look at particular policies if there are any in particular that you think should be changed. On the design standards for downtown, it is an implementation action, and it is still planned to have objective design standards, and to have an overlay. And if your committee pleases, we can also add in there to have a focus on historic architecture for the downtown, or an implementation action that also calls for a study of the historic downtown, so that can be folded in. And then for Subarea 4 guidelines, that can be moved up. It's shown as sometime within the next 7 years right now, but that could be moved up. And I believe that was a concern about the red-tailed Baylord project up in that area. And although we can't, that's in the county, and we can't put guidelines or design standards onto that, that whole area, would benefit from having future design guidelines. And I'll stop there.
Any questions?
I think we're kind of overdoing the historical downtown. I don't see too much about this town being that preservable. Others may disagree, but I don't. So I would just like to limit it to a study, not make it a whole overlay zone, personally.
Can I ask a follow-up question? How would that go, either be part of, or would that be separate or part of the objective design standards for the downtown T? Could that be folded into that process, or would this be something different?
Certainly. Vice Mayor Solorzano, you tell us. It could be a separate study, or it could just become part of that action that's already identified, and we can add some specific language about looking at historic considerations.
Because I know that process is still ongoing, right? Like to be able to find out those objective design standards for the downtown area. And so going forward, what will it look like for the public to be able to weigh in on that? Because I know that's a process that got started and then got paused and then was kind of channeled into that housing element, and we're going to be going back to it now, so.
Yes, we're very eager to get back to it. We had a draft downtown objective design standards, and then we pivoted over to the housing objective design standards for the housing element. When we do get back to it, there will be public input process, not only in asking for creating a draft and asking for public input, but then also taking it to the Architectural Review Board for more input from that board and from the public.
Got it.
And then ultimately Planning Commission and Council.
Yeah, don't forget us. Can I ask a question? Oh, shoot. Well, you know, when you get old. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open up the public comment period. And we have Catherine Salant.
Okay, in I was a member of this committee in 2024, when we were going through the first draft of the updated plan. And there was much discussion about views and about what makes about our town is so unique, and that we have both mountain views and ocean views. And ocean views are not visible from every neighborhood, but the mountains are, and it's something that makes our town truly unique from every street. And we talk about view corridors. Well, every street in Carpinteria is a view corridor because you can see the mountains. And in fact, for most people in their backyard, they can see them, or across the street. It is truly unique, and I think that in the draft that you showed us, you should say that specifically. And I also note that you said the should and shall, and I appreciate that we don't have to have shall every time. And then you go on to say that the views is a somewhat subjective notion, and I personally don't think a view is subjective. I mean, a view is a view, right? We can all see views. And I think that it should very strongly say that the views should be protected.
Should or shall?
Shall. They shall. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Shall. Thank you for catching that. Shall be protected.
Thank you. Mike Wondolowski.
Just one comment in the community character Conchalumba neighborhood section. There's the line that says the city aims to improve the neighborhood with more on-street parking, safe pedestrian access, street-facing entrances, and open landscaping. Maybe I'm missing it, but I'm not clear how we get to create more on-street parking, and those other things too. It just seems like an unachievable dream. Maybe I just don't understand it. Maybe there's something else about that, but it just seems that that's something that I cannot imagine what policy would support that goal. Thanks.
Thank you. And lastly, Nathan Pratt, please. Welcome.
I found my email, or an email. About more parking in Concha Loma. I live in Concha Loma, and it's 100% street parking. There's no more to create.
They're garages. Some people have garages,
Yeah.
not street parking.
Can we?
Anyway, I don't see any street parking that's not being used for street parking is what I'm trying to say. My comment was about the historic downtown area, both for commercial and residential properties. The line I pulled out of your report was that the whole idea was, quote, small beach town character, and that was repeated on multiple occasions throughout your document, that was the goal of what this is all about, to maintain. So if that's your goal, then you want to maintain what a small historic beach town looks like, and that would be a pre-World War II design standard. There are the beginning of modern styling coming in the city. I noted two properties in particular, one at 5157 8th Street. There was a modern home, like a classic pulled out of West LA style home, very boxy and contemporary, which is a beautiful design, but not for historic beach community. And then also on the commercial side, half of the Linden Square construction is a kind of a retro 50s vibe. I think they were trying to get it with the zigzags or something. I don't know, So I noted in your report that your consultant had recommended ranch as a classic design standard. As you know from anybody who grew up in Southern California, ranch houses were typically post-war tract homes. 60s, 70s, tons of ranches everywhere in the valley and wherever you got them. I would not consider that to be a small beach town look. And then they had a mid-century modern. Mid-century modern is obviously not a beach town look as well. So I thought I recommended in my letter I wrote, I don't know if you guys saw any of this, that you really focus in on, the typical bungalow, craftsman, Spanish, historic brick styles. Those seem to be the four larger groupings of architectural styles in any historic beach community, and particularly a California one. So I thought you needed to refocus your design standards there, because the mid-century modern, that is right now 2025 hyper-modern. You can design right through that into a hyper-modern house. And once you get half a dozen of those things going in just off of Linden Avenue, which will come if you allow it, you really, there's a nexus of a high concentration of original bungalow houses still there, which is so rare. To find anywhere so many bungalow homes in one little place is amazing, So I think that's really a great resource that we have here, and that's why people love it. And I think for the long-term commercial growth also of the downtown area, that's the tourist draw. That's what people like about Carpinteria. It's this little funky beach town, you know what I mean? And I think we need to keep it that way, not, people can come in and build new stuff, but you can skin it any way you like. You can take any house or any commercial building and put any kind of facade you like. You can make it look old-timey or brand new. Either way, it's just as easy to make it old-timey. So I recommend that you should really codify that and make it very strict. You guys have to be exact, inch-by-inch rules, because any little loophole you leave anywhere, a developer will go right through it. That's what they get paid. That's what they hire the consultants to do, is to find loopholes. So you cannot leave any loopholes anywhere. I know there's shoulds and shalls and woulds and coulds and all that. You got to make it real clear. That's my recommendation. Okay, good luck.
Thank you. All right, anybody on Zoom?
Yes, Patrick Crooks, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I am unmuted if you guys can hear me again.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate that again. I think going back to your guys' minutes from 9 months ago, we did hash this out previously, and there was a lot of discussion around this. I think Nick kind of came up with an idea, if I remember right, and it might have been kind of communicated in those minutes, but really making an effort there to go through public city property and really working through those view corridors and view sheds that are present currently, and I think, again, we don't recognize what the view corridor really is. It really is subjective unless we are going to define that. And I know Ted Rhodes has attempted to also communicate that if we're talking about camera lenses and telephoto lenses and view angles. But I think and would hope and would encourage you all to look at that as part of the EIR process and potentially, working through those and setting up specific areas where you can more clearly or better word some of the policy and really go as far to use shall language. I think, again, in our letter, we put some strong language in there of how the general plan really aims to preserve these things and even goes as far as to claim to enhance them. So you can't lose views and enhance or restore anything with that, in my opinion. So I think we kind of look at those things, and then I'll just kind of jump back into Chevron's property as you move out of Concha Loma neighborhood. I mean, I think the application of PUD zoning there any further to the east really begins to disconnect and open up sprawl there. The intent or idea to have residential there any further the Concha Loma neighborhood, which currently we don't have anything south of Carp Ave there in the Bluffs planning area. So really looking as sub-area 6 there in the document to be that kind of transition with the woodlands and blue gum, Tasmanian blue gum that are found there on the Chevron properties, and as you move out across the bluffs, obviously out onto the nature preserve, and looking to really see that those resources are made available and persist through future generations. So that's kind of where I'm at with those comments, but I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick.
There are no more Zoom speakers.
Did you want to speak? Okay, come on up, and can you fill out a speaker slip when you get a chance? Thank you, Annie.
I agree with the gentleman that spoke before about having very specific guidelines for downtown. And I think time is really of the essence because there are three properties downtown that are ripe for development. The Rite Aid building, the Robitaille property, the surf shop property. And if we don't have very specific guidelines, then these properties can, be proposed to be developed, and we won't have anything in place to control what it's going to look like. And if we don't control it, then it can be something that we really don't want.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public comment period and bring it back.
I have a couple comments, questions
Okay.
regarding certain policies in the community design element. Is that better? Regarding certain policies in the community design element, in particular, scenic views, community design element 1E. I mean, we're getting back to the should and shall. I'd like to see that one changed to shall, which would create a binding obligation to protect the mountain views. So new development shall. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to actually wordsmith this particular one.
Commissioner Van Antwerp, I can try to bring it up on the screen.
Yeah, I just think it ensures a clearer legal standard. I think tightening this up is a good idea.
Let me try to adjust here. It's this one right here, CD 1E. Apologize that. Can you see that okay?
Yeah. I also think I think it speaks to a social equity issue as well. Since we're not going to have a separate element for social justice, I think that it speaks that, I mean, this is, as Catherine stated earlier, I mean, we are surrounded by mountain views. And not all of us can afford to live on the ocean or have ocean views, but they're all right there. So that's my, go ahead. Sorry.
How would you deal with that? I mean, what if somebody said, well, if I stand over here and that building's here, I can't see the mountains? I mean, how do you make that work? I'm all for it, but I don't know how you do it. I mean, you just can't, some Tom, Dick, and Harry's walking down the street and goes, oh, I can't see the mountains. Well,
Yeah, are there like special studies that,
it's very tricky to do a view policy.
Yeah, for a general plan, for it to be a general blanket policy, it's almost impossible to enforce. We would be in a lot of trouble, I think, with that one, for it to be a shall, because it would just be so different for every spot in the city and any potential, you know, if you have to put up one pole for a utility, is that blocking it? Kind of.
Well, I'm going to ask a related question, so that even if, when development projects come in, the view corridor question can come up at multiple times in the process, right? Whether it's ARB or Planning Commission or Council. So even if it were to stay should, it doesn't mean that we're locking ourselves into not being able to give feedback that ensures that those view corridors are protected. Would that be
That's
right?
correct, because with staff's input and then the Architectural Review Board input, usually you then get to a compromise where you're not preventing them from being able to build anything, but you're creating the best project that still allows for aesthetics and views.
If I may, I was thinking, I'm trying to recall back to our discussion from last year when we had a, spirited kind of dialogue about this, and I think there were a couple of take-homes, as I recall it, and, right, one of them was, I think, distinguishing between view corridors, which are, right, kind of defined and constrained by something, whether it's development on the sides of the street or what have you, versus like a unobstructed, view shed or something that might be a more broad view like you'd get from, the Carpinteria Bluffs, for example. And I thought there was some discussion about maybe there being the need to do some work to define certain areas of the city where we have these unobstructed broad views that we want to identify and want to prioritize for protection, and maybe that, would be appropriate for a shall, right? That, public views of the mountains from these particular areas are, worthy of protection, right? X, Y, and Z, whatever areas we put them on a map, whatever it is we do. And then maybe separately, there could be policy language about preserving view corridors, right? In the downtown, the primary views of the mountains are kind of down the street corridors, whether it's looking west, down 7th Street, or it's looking, north up Palm Avenue, right? You're kind of seeing the mountains up the middle of the street and maybe to a little bit of degree over the tops of development on either side. And so then if you were wanting to objectively try to protect those types of view corridors, that would relate maybe to some of your design policies that start to articulate, second floors and upper floors being set back from the street facade so that you have, kind of this wedding cake type effect that tries to preserve a little bit broader of a corridor up and down your streets rather than allowing, say, three-story development to come right up to the sidewalk, that kind of thing. So there's ways that we can do both of these things, but it's going to take some more work, to kind of roll up our sleeves and dig into it and figure out, are there certain places where we're looking to preserve view corridors and what's that look like? And are there other places where we're looking to preserve these, broader, more unobstructed, view sheds, if you will? So that isn't something that has yet been done, but I thought there was some dialogue about it last time, and maybe we just need, more concrete direction from the GPUC on where you want to go with this. There is some language, to that effect in the zoning code currently, in the coastal development standards, 1450, that do kind of, just at a very high level, identify a few of these sort of key visual, areas, Linden Avenue, the bluffs, from the beach, right? And maybe that's a starting point, but if there's other areas that we, really want to zero in on and offer a higher level of protection to, this is an opportunity to, if not define them, at least to commit to doing the work to defining them, as a future implementation measure to the general plan.
That's what I was going to say, Nick. Why can't you put, we shall endeavor to identify these areas and be it part of the EIR? Is that possible? Because, yeah, the views are very important, and I'm all for the views, but I can see somebody coming in with a really good development and, oh my God, there's a bit of the mountain it's going to block, and everybody goes nuts. And sometimes you got to balance these things and weigh them to see if they're that important. But maybe we could just put the view corridor and the, what's the other thing, what was the other?
View shed.
As a study, as part of the
Panoramic views.
Okay, whatever you want to define it as, seeing the mountains clearly.
So-
I just think you can include all that, but it just can't be right now with trying to reinvent the definition of view.
So how about a hypothetical? What about an 18-story building?
I'd say denied.
It seems like,
Awful.
even right next to the freeway, you're blocking views of travelers coming through, enjoying this beautiful little town, and here's your 18-story building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be inconsistent with policies to protect views.
So at some point in there, I think I see a shall.
That's what I'm saying. I think there can be some shalls in here, but I don't think it can necessarily be a blanket shall across the board, right? I don't think we can end up at a point, or it's realistic to end up at a point where it says all public mountain views shall be protected.
Right.
But I think we could realistically end up at a point where we say, these certain public views identified on figure, LU4 or whatever, shall be protected because they have, high public scenic value, yada, 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 whatever we can find to support it. And then you can have, maybe some other language of, in other scenarios, yes, we should try to preserve views wherever we can, but they maybe don't rise to that same level as these, higher value public views that we, desperately want to preserve and protect.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to go through that exercise of, okay, what are those high value public views that we want to preserve? Is it from the freeway? Is it from Linden Avenue? Is it from Palm Avenue? Is it from Carpinteria Avenue? I don't know, right? That's the exercise we would need to go through, but I think there's ways that you can have a little bit of both.
And then not to confuse it even more, but if you look at OSC 2D, which is development on the bluffs. I was thinking, we're talking about, well, what views do we want to preserve and make sure that they are accessed as equitably as possible. But on this one, I would say we change discourage to prohibit or prevent development on the bluffs, to protect the visual quality of the shoreline, public access, recreation, and habitat value. I don't know if you want to bring it up. So there's that one as well, as we're sifting through some of the wording on these.
Well, the way you stated it, it sounds like a takings. You can't prohibit development on private property.
Prohibit or prevent, so just discourage.
I'm sorry, I'm playing a little catch-up. What was the policy again?
OSC 2D. Well, that would be if we were to designate that OSR, I guess. But it looks like they certainly do try
The
to.
ESHA policy, is that what you're looking at? Because that's how it reads to us. It's an ESHA policy. OSC 2D?
OSC 2D. I wonder if I wrote it down wrong. OSC ABC.
Oh, no, not that.
I think I wrote it down wrong. Darn.
Well, it's in here somewhere.
Maybe we can come back to it when we get to that element.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Anything else on community design?
Yeah, I remember my question now. The community design guidelines, didn't they have different sections, like one at the beach? There was a beach design guidelines, and there was, I just can't remember.
Commissioner Benefield, yes. In our current general plan, we broke up the city into 6 sub-areas.
Right.
And each sub-area was intended to eventually get its own set of neighborhood design guidelines. I think we got about halfway through before we had to pause that effort and move on to other
Housing, yeah.
items. But it is on the list to eventually get back to those. And
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, given the way that state housing law has evolved, I think moving forward, we're more likely to try to get away from design guidelines, which are subjective and don't have the weight of law, and maybe move more towards objective design standards that are the shalls that we keep hearing folks are looking for.
Well, given the change, I think that's a good idea. I think what this gentleman said about, skinning the building, I like that, was excellent. I mean, you could put all the housing in the world. It's what it looks like and how it fits in that counts.
Yeah, I think forgot the phrase, the devil's in the details, right? It's
It would really help.
The challenge with objective design standards is they can become really formulaic. You're right, and you end up kind of breeding out creativity and variety unless you can really devote the resources and the attention into crafting a really robust set of standards that allow for a variety of different architectural styles that you want to preserve. So there's a delicate balance there, and historically, right, the city's kind of prided itself on not having a distinct architectural style that defines us, right? We're not like downtown Santa Barbara where everything's red tile roofs and plaster walls. You walk down Linden and there's a craftsman bungalow next to a Quonset hut, next to a Wild West facade, next to, you know, I don't even know what, right? I mean, it's a very eclectic mix of architectural styles, and it was, I
No,
think.
the style is eclectic. It's not a mixture of eclectic styles. It's eclectic.
Sure, the style is eclectic. The style
in
is varied.
In the 90s, we hired a planning expert. I think his name was Dewani.
Sawani, yeah.
And he came
Andres
out and
Sawani.
walked the town, and he said, what you have here is eclectic.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so it's, in a sense, it's, I mean, maybe it's not a beach town, but I think one of the charms of Carpinteria is that it's just this little working town that happens to be next to a beach. I mean, even the Concha Loma neighborhood, which is all ranch style, it's right next to a beach. And it's very unusual to find a residential neighborhood next to a beach that's ranch style. It's usually much higher density. So it's just, that's part of the charm of Carpinteria is this eclectic nature. I remember when we were starting to start thinking about the design guidelines for downtown, Steve Goja just got a napkin and said, you know, well, this block, here's how we'll articulate it. And the primary concern was, what are the heights going to be and the variation of them? And that's still an important thing to do.
That's kind of where I was headed is, you know, I think if you try to dictate the architectural style too much, it can become formulaic, right? Every building shall have a covered porch. Every building shall have this, shall have that. But what I think you can potentially do instead is to, you know, go walk Linden, right, and try to focus in on, you know, okay, what actually defines the character of the streetscape? Is it the style of buildings, or is it, you know, the variety of buildings? Is it the size and scale of the buildings? Is it the fact that no two buildings are identical, you know, in terms of their appearance and their fenestrations and their finishes? And are there ways that we can distill some of those, you know, character defining attributes of the downtown into objective design standards? I think there probably is, but it's just, you know, I think that's probably more important than saying, you know,
Yes.
thou shalt do craftsman, bungalow, or brick.
Yes. Not easy.
Okay, anybody else? I guess we can move on.
All right. Next up is the circulation element. The comments called for stronger accessibility ADA measures and measurable objectives, requests for electric vehicle charging expansion and return of the Seaside Shuttle, improved bike and pedestrian connections, and more traffic planning. And there were concerns about congestion and outdated parking inventory, as well as some corrections to street names and technical corrections. So for staff's review, I will point out that ADA improvements and objectives are required in part of the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. And since they're always being updated, we recommend keeping them in that plan unless there's something specific to add to our policies that you think should be added to the circulation element. And for EV charging, it is also covered in, it's covered in policy circulation 1F, but funding, we could add something under implementation actions to seek more funding for city-owned sites to expand EV charging. And there are some circulation element policies for additional coordination with MTD, for transit, for the bringing back the Seaside Shuttle, and adding bike and pedestrian improvements. The parking studies, those are done semi-regularly, but the setting does fluctuate, so we don't know how much you want to try and establish the parking setting in the general plan. I don't think too much clarification would be needed, but an implementation action there is one for the parking management plan, and that could be further clarified to ensure that parking innovations are looked at, and that we always keep an eye out for better options. And then finally, the errors that were pointed out will correct, and I'll just stop right there.
Any questions?
Yes. You could maybe have a threshold of square footage built before you do a parking study, or have a certain, you see, if you do it every 5 years or something, it might not cover the problem. I mean, because right now we have a big boom of square footage added to the city. This might be the time to do that. I don't know, just a thought, I don't know.
Yeah, I like the idea of not having a prescriptive parking management schedule as well, because I would think that parking can be such a fluid issue, and so I like the idea of kind of doing it on an as-needed basis, like what you're saying.
Yeah, and then we have to figure out what the need is, like, you can't park. Or, after 200,000 square feet or something, not that we have.
Do you have another question?
No, I'm
good. Just for people who might be concerned about the ADA improvements, what would some examples be of some of the ADA improvements that are part of current CIP projects, capital improvement projects?
Commissioner Benefield, as an example, some of the current projects that our Public Works Department is planning for or working on are things like sidewalk accessibility. So we'll be seeing that with the Carpinteria Bridge replacement project. The Linden Avenue improvements will also incorporate, up-to-date accessible designs. Things like the Franklin Creek Trail project, that pathway will become ADA compliant. So you can kind of see as these projects, kind of come down the pipeline, accessibility standards are, because of the codes and regulations that apply to them as public projects, we have to incorporate accessible design into them.
Did you start by the marsh?
Well, I appreciate that, and part of the reason I wanted to ask the question is because I can understand if people aren't aware of the fact that those ADA improvements are a required part of CIP, so thank you for giving some examples so that people can hopefully keep in mind that this is something that is happening.
Yeah, they're also, just to build on what Megan was saying, they're also picked up or, implemented on a project-by-project basis as private development occurs, right? So if someone builds a new project, they need to at least bring their frontage up to current accessibility standards. So it is sort of this, piecemeal effort over time to improve accessibility throughout the city. But getting back to the general plan, right, if the policies that are in the general plan as currently crafted don't go far enough in, either promoting or supporting or encouraging, the direction you want to see this stuff to go, that's where we need some feedback on, what are we lacking and what do we need to do to, make the general plan more closely aligned with the community's goals for accessibility.
Do you need an answer to something else? Oh.
I was going to change the subject.
Oh, no.
Is that okay? Okay, I was going to ask about the Seaside Shuttle. I know I put that in my comments to you guys. And I did look at the WAVE, which is MTD's replacement idea, but it's not the same thing. So wanted to bring that back up. See if anybody was, yeah.
Actually, I'm on the MTD board, so I can give some information about that. So Seaside Shuttle, unfortunately, it was one of the lower performing MTD services when it was in action. Then during COVID, a lot of the services from MTD went down, like they decreased, and MTD is still rebuilding as of right now. The ridership still isn't up to pre-COVID levels. And so for a lower performing route like the shuttle, the limited funding that MTD has MT is still relying on some federal COVID funding just to make the budget ends meet. Reinstating service like the Seaside Shuttle, it isn't something that's feasible for their budget right now. And really the cost is with the drivers, right? Because you have the driver's salary and then their benefits and all that. So it isn't just about the physical shuttle, but it's also about staffing it in a way where it's predictable and it's functional for the most people possible. And the wave, as you mentioned, the point-by-point thing, so currently that's in its pilot stage in Goleta. And so hopefully Carpinteria is definitely the next city it's going to be extended to. And so the idea is that whatever feedback they get from Goleta, whether it's that, this isn't working enough, we want a fixed route, like smaller circulation project like the shuttle, that'll be good to know. Or it could be that we hear from the Goleta response that the wave is something that maybe, more seniors are using than they anticipated, or more families are using, or that, they want to expand that to, because it's so successful, to have additional vans. So I think that we don't yet know how it's being received, but I like that it's going to be coming to CARP next, at least, so that we can see what that looks like for us, knowing that the shuttle it's not part of MTD's plans to bring it back.
Yeah, I think the wave, it's going to be more expensive too. And from what I've looked at, it looks like it's a completely different model than what we had. And I don't know if even the Seaside Shuttle, because it is circulation, and I think it was very effective when we had it. I still see that in the general plan, but something like that.
So to that point, right, just looking at the circulation policies that we have here under Objective C2, you do have a couple of, sort of general policies, C2B, C2C, and C2F, arguably that, commit the city to trying to continue to work with MTD and other service providers to improve transit, improve circulation routes or transit routes, improve frequency of service, all those types of things that I think could be an impetus to continue to work with MTD to, bring back the Seaside Shuttle if that ever did pencil out at some point, down the road in the future. In the meantime, the general plan also has policy C2D, which, specifically, calls out for the city to work with MTD on the replacement of the shuttle, which, currently is this WAVE program that Councilmember Slarson was just talking about. So, arguably it can kind of be read that it's in there, but if you wanted to, massage one or more of those policies to continue to advocate for the, the return of Seaside Shuttle as another option, I think we could certainly work that in there somewhere. I think we just need to be realistic that at least in the near term, it doesn't appear to be financially feasible to bring it back.
Yeah, I understand that. And I cannot tell you how many members of the community and people talk about that, and I'm sure you hear about it too, which is why I do see it as something pretty important. And Monica, I appreciate the background, on that. Thank you.
But the Seaside Shuttle also, whatever you want to call it, some internal circulation. We can help pay for that too. It isn't just MTD. I'm sure they'll take our money. But we've got to keep it in. It is important for many reasons, like global climate change and, access, and people don't have cars. And it's just such a valuable thing. It maybe is more important than some other things we do in this town, like beer fests and things, just because I don't like beer. So, but I think it's really important to keep it in.
On the parking management plan, implementation action 4, the Public Facilities Committee had a advanced presentation several years ago on. Sorry. Thank you for that. The Public Facilities Committee had a presentation on that a couple of years ago, and that's committee is composed of Wade Nomura and myself. So we're two very different people. We both found all the parking management solutions offered so distasteful that we sent Walker packing. And we haven't seen them until, maybe they're hoping that the climate's better now for parking management. But speaking of parking management, I think one of the best things might be the Seaside Shuttle for parking management. I mean, I don't know, that's interesting to think about. Yeah, we closed the public comment period. Oh, no, we didn't open the public comment period, sorry.
When can I ask a question?
Shall we open the public comment period? Yeah, go ahead, come on up.
Your public
Come on up,
parking-
please.
Microphone.
If you guys are talking about increasing parking, do you guys own the lot behind Linden that's a kind of a public parking lot back there?
Yes.
Of course.
Why don't you guys build the parking structure there?
Agree.
Like every other city does, they're everywhere, just put up 2 or 3, whatever height you want, whether it's, 1 down, 2 up, or whatever, and triple your parking.
Yeah,
And just charge for it, and it'll be probably a self-funding, if not a revenue generator in the long run.
yeah, we've talked about that from time to time.
Okay, I just didn't hear anybody talking about it, so it seemed like an easy solution. All right.
Thank you. Alan Koch has given us a speaker slip.
Good evening, committee, staff. First, I want to commend everybody, the committee and the staff. I don't know when this really started, Mindy, but to getting it this far, it's a Herculean task, and I commend everybody on this. I just have a couple of observations here to follow up with a little bit of what Mike said back there about benefits and costs, okay? Start off with the EV charging, and again, we know EVs can over time change, but right now they're a small mix of what's out there in the sense of how individuals access the downtown T or the beach area. I attended the Downtown T Business Advisory Board, and the staff person supporting that committee is the Public Works Department, I believe. But Dave was there, and they had an action item on EV usage. And I believe in parking lot 1 and parking lot 2, we probably have 7 or 8 spaces there that's currently available for usage. Well, they did a little study there, and I just took the highlight that each space was occupied in the sense of a vehicle charging for 3 hours out of the day. Okay, because the machines there have software for usage. Okay, so there's a benefit, but there's a cost there. And then I think the committee discussed about a conjunctive type of a concept, share it, X hours a day for EV and X hour days for gas. Just an observation there. The other sort of cost benefit has to do with the improved public transportation, and for all the right reasons. Well, I was walking down Linden one day, and I saw a big Amtrak bus come out of Fifth Street there. I guess there's a bridge out somewhere further up north on Amtrak, and they have to do a bus bridge. I was just wondering, where do they park when they when they bring that bus there, Amtrak?
Anywhere.
On Fifth, or they just try to pull in and so again, great idea, benefits, but there's a cost to it if you're going to have a little bus terminal somewhere. If you're going to do some more regional type of coordination between buses and Amtrak. The last point, and again, this is related to something that's really near and dear to myself here, on the parking studies, is just to understand that the current public parking is all 100% shared parking, okay? Both in the parking lot or on the street. We are bringing a totally new, potentially, if it gets approved and goes through, a totally new user group of parking in a downtown, or small little downtown, okay? And the surf liner in, and I'm just, don't know how that's gonna be impacted. We have the EIR, okay? We have the planning commission in the future to talk about that through the development of the process. But I'm just, again, I don't know how that fits in here, at all, in the sense of public parking as part of the circulation plan. Okay, should a hotel, be part of the downtown T parking supply? Because we all know if the hotel is on private land, they have to build out one space per room and X spaces for employees. So I don't know how that fits in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, come on up.
Thank you, Council and Commission. I will fill out another form. Wanted to make 3 comments, and at the risk of being a little creative, I'm going to cram one of these into this element because I don't see where it fits, or at least it wasn't provided for in the other elements. And I think you could extrapolate this thought with a little bit of creativity that dropping power lines goes along with circulation. You can put them in the street, and my suggestion would be to think creatively about if you're going to do street work, put the power lines in the street work. Bring them down. The other thought along that line is, and there's been a little bit of advertising lately about Anaheim having completed, after a 10-year process, completed dropping all the power lines in public-owned land. Now, it took them 10 years to do it, but they did it. So again, I think at the risk of, reaching a little bit to say that dropping power lines fits in the circulation plan, maybe it's in the safety plan under wildfires, but I really think it's an opportunity, and it creates a relationship with special districts potentially, sanitation, water, and so on. That's where a lot of the infrastructure is in those public right-of-ways. So it's a creative way to think about it. 2 other thoughts, completely unrelated, on parking. Get a little bit provocative, and I'll try not to use names, but there's an awfully big parking lot on 6th and Walnut that's private. That could very well be conjunctive use for the downtown area, and it sits virtually empty most of the time. So give you a strong suggestion about that, and I don't want to call out the property owner or what, but I think everybody knows what that space is. And then the other thought is conjunctive parking in the downtown T, I think, should not be granted to commercial, non-public facing businesses. Now, again, I don't want to use names, but there's at least one I can think of that is a commercial business that's on Linden that uses conjunctive parking for commercial vehicles, and it's quite a bit of occupant use. So non-public facing commercial businesses not using conjunctive parking. Thanks.
All right, anybody on Zoom? Okay, we'll
There's
bring it
nobody on
back.
Zoom.
Any further discussion on this?
Well, about the pole lines, poles and the lines, do we make every new project put those underground?
Commissioner Benefield, so new development or major redevelopment, so even major remodels need to at least underground their laterals. So that's the the overhead lines that would come from the pole to their house or to their building. Only large projects are typically required to underground the actual transmission lines that might run across their frontage.
Okay.
And part of that has to just do with the enormous cost that comes with undergrounding those lines, particularly if they have transformers or other things on them. It quickly gets into the, six figures or higher.
Can you add them slowly to the CIP budget?
I think you could, and that's what we've seen happen in the past, right? So, like, if you go back to pre-90s, I think there was still overhead lines on Linden and on Carp Ave in the downtown, and we did the whole major streetscape improvement and underground all the lines and improved the sidewalks and did everything else. So there are ways that we can do it as part of future capital projects as those are conceived and put into the CIP down the road.
Is that worthy of note for the general plan, that this is our goal?
It could be, I don't know if it belongs in the circulation element, but it
Okay.
probably belongs, public facilities is maybe the home for it, if it isn't
Put it
there
wherever
already,
you want.
to put kind of the policy framework in place to support that,
I think it's
additional
important.
undergrounding.
It helps with the visuals of the city, too.
Absolutely. It would help us too, because, it's been something that administratively we've required of new development, but if we had clearer thresholds defined in the general plan to say, a project above a certain size shall do X, Y, and Z, that makes it far less subjective in terms of deciding who has to underground lines or who has to underground, just their drop versus transmission lines, that kind of thing.
Anybody else? Okay, before we move on, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. So we have open space coming up, so that's a little enticement to hang on. Or leave. Welcome back from our break. And so we're going to get started again on the general plan update, comment, review, and discussion. And we're off to the open space topic.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. On open space conservation, we received some technical corrections, which of course we're happy to address. We got requests for stronger protections for the bluffs, harbor seals, and sensitive species. The county submitted some concerns about restrictions on regional housing in the ag and greenbelt areas. There was a request for stronger night sky protections, and there was interest in adding indigenous access and cultural resource recognition. And so for staff's response, of course, we'll address technical corrections. For the stronger resource protections, we think that would be a good one to analyze in the EIR and include in reduced alternatives. So that could, any policies for more protections can also be added to the reduced alternatives. On the county's concern, our policies do not restrict the county, but our existing policies that are in the draft they do call for continued coordination rather than restriction. And then there is an implementation action for a night sky ordinance, and we will be sure to use the counties and other nearby examples when we begin that program. And finally, we can add or expand on the cultural resource policies or implementation measures to have more cultural resource recognition and access. And some of that can also happen through consultation during the EIR process, if you like. So I'll stop there and
What are the,
questions.
what's the county worried about? What are the potential restrictions? What's the deal there?
Because we want to discourage developing up the ag areas in Carp Valley out on our borders. They're concerned that we are going too far in trying to do that and restricting them on their housing needs. But we think the policies, what they do is they call for continued coordination with the county about development on our borders and development of ag in the coastal zone.
So we, in the 2003 general plan update, we had a whole boundary of ag land that we were going to convert to urban use as a buffer. And the Coastal Commission shot that down and said that you're converting agriculture. And so we hope the Coastal Commission remains strong.
Yeah, you mean the red tail development? Because isn't that zoned A?
It's not,
Oh,
yeah,
shoot.
unfortunately.
All right.
Okay.
In terms of the cultural, cultural resource policies, does the city currently have anything like that in place, or would this be something where we'd be starting something new?
My understanding, Vice Mayor Solarsno, through the chair, I think this would be kind of an add-on to what we already have. So it's a suggestion that for especially public access areas that homage is paid to the indigenous peoples and their land, and additional educational opportunities be provided there as well. We do have, example of that, like with the Tomo play area and the trail. So I think it's an idea to kind of keep that format going. And so we can certainly explore that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea, especially thinking there might be certain parts of the city that would benefit, like if they're important sites or something like that. It'd be great to have more of the kind of either wayfinding signage or something like that to really underscore the Chumash impact on really everything that the city is built on. So I like that idea of looking at some implementation for that.
Any other questions?
The photovoltaic inclusion on roofs, is that already a rule? I thought we agreed we would do that in this city.
I think you're jumping ahead of us.
Oh, I'm in safety.
Okay, we'll get
Sorry,
there.
Never mind.
All right, so we'll open the public comment period, and we have some slips. Mike Wondolowski, please. Welcome again.
It's great to be back. On the night sky ordinance topic, it's great the city is committed to moving forward with this. One technical note that I imagine staff is probably will be addressing is that the line about establish the ordinance doesn't say should or shall. It's not parallel to the other statements in the document. So I imagine that's probably being dealt with. But there's a couple important things. The wording is about a night sky ordinance, and it references, the staff notes, references the county's night lighting ordinance. And that's a significant difference I want to make sure we're real clear on. And we firmly urge the committee to have staff change it from night sky to night lighting. The night sky is just part of it. That's light that points up to cause light pollution in the sky, can't see the stars, all that, and is biological impacts too. Night lighting includes someone's light shining into your yard, light trespass, and floodlights on driveways pointing into driver's eyes, things like that. Even though they're pointed down, they're not lighting up the sky, it's still night lighting problems. And so that distinction is super important. Just clarifying that night sky ordinance should be night lighting ordinance. And that's what the county did. And they have a quite strong revised ordinance adopted a few months ago. Let's see. And then other similar statements on other sections about the city, should or shall generate an ordinance or some document. It talks about, like, for example, noise. It says the city shall adopt, maintain, and enforce a noise ordinance. That wording's missing from this night lighting statement. It just says establish and adopt and enforce. It's not an intentional omission, I think, but showing parallel structure without that. Looking at noise and night lighting, you'd say, oh, the noise must be more important. It'll be enforced at a higher priority than the night lighting, which I'm sure is not the intent. This document should have that parallel structure. So the wording we recommend for the implementation action is the city shall establish, adopt, maintain, and enforce a night lighting ordinance that provides standards for reduction of direct and ambient light in the night sky and other forms of light trespass. And that incorporates all the concerns I just relayed. And that's from our CVA comment letter on this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only speaker slip I have on open space. Would you like to comment, Amrita? I will modify your form.
Please do, thank you. On page 5 of the staff report, and number 5 under the analysis, it says, if GPUC agrees, staff can expand cultural resource policies. Why would it not be staff will expand cultural resources? I mean, if they agree, then you will add it. Why would you say can add it? If they've agreed, then you will do it. Not you can do it. Can is different than will do it. Anyway, and that's basically my only comment in that section. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Anybody on Zoom?
We do have one Zoom speaker. Patrick Crooks, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm back. We did go ahead and we had additional comments here on this section, that we did issue in that letter, which I hope you guys had a chance to look at. I could probably speak a little more to these. I could probably speak specifically. I know on page 117, we suggested a revision to really include addition of language there because of the panoramic views that are available there. So including San Ynez Mountains, Santa Monica Mountains, coastline, Channel Islands, and the Pacific Ocean are all available panoramic views there at the Carpinteria Bluffs from different vantage points. Also there on page 117, appreciate the call out there for the Coastal Act, the Public Resources Code, section 302251. And I won't read it out, but I think the highlight there is, again, getting back to visual resources and to restore and enhance visual quality in any visually degraded areas. So recognizing they're actually looking to retain and protect those public views in those special circumstances. So looking for, that language to stay consistent throughout here. And there was a lot of agreement that we had calling out specific policies. I guess I won't read through all of them just to spare you guys the time. I will point to one was OSC 11A. We did disagree there and feel like should needs to be replaced by shall, recognizing that Public Resources Code. New development shall be sited and designed to avoid impacts on scenic resources and to preserve public views. It just seems kind of like a no-brainer. I know it might be more difficult in practice with the legalities, but I just would like to point a little attention to that. And then OSC 13A, again, new development shall be sited and designed to avoid adverse impacts on cultural resources, including archaeological and historical resources to the maximum extent feasible. So I can kind of dive into more of these. I won't, and I'll spare you. I know I spoke about it probably a year and a half ago when this section came up previously with the draft, but again, looking for, that section specifically is going to highlight a lot of the biological resources that we have. So the white-tailed kite, Crotch's bumblebee, and monarch butterfly are all ones that persist there on the Carpinteria Bluffs, and so they do garner some additional protections under, CDFW. But just really appreciate your guys' attention to those here in this section. So I'll take my comments off.
Thank you.
There is nobody else on Zoom with their hand raised.
Okay, let's bring it back to have some wrap-up comments. All right. We will proceed to the next section.
Certainly. Next up is safety. We received, again, technical corrections, but this was from the county on debris basins. There were calls for more photovoltaic requirements to be specified for new or major redevelopment. There was a comment to increase watershed buffer zones and expand tree planting and replacement. And there was a comment to ban herbicides and pesticides. And so staff's initial response on that is that, of course, we'll correct any technical language per the county's input on debris basins, and we can also add additional coordination, policy on additional coordination for sediment management. On the solar requirements, Commissioner Benefield is correct that that is already in the building code. What we could do is add maybe something to the public facilities element that encourages more solar on existing development. For increased and expanded buffers, this can get real tricky real fast. We would recommend maybe analyzing that in the reduced alternative in the EIR. and then be able to analyze the difference in potential development if with increased buffers. And the street tree policies are already covered in the community design element. But again, we could add something else in the public facilities element that would strengthen the city's role in tree replacement. And then finally, with the herbicides and pesticides, we cannot regulate private use of that, but there are lots of regulations like the Ag Commissioner and state law. But what we could do, there are already policies under open space and safety that help minimize exposure to herbicides and pesticides and minimize those kinds of chemicals getting into the water and pollutants. And we can look at that again further in the EIR also. So I will stop there and see if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks.
About the street tree policy, if we were to put that in public facilities element as well, how would that benefit the city? Like, how that would strengthen the city's role? How?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Solarsno. I think mainly it would be something to drive our considerations at the city level for urban tree replacement and seeking funding to make sure that we continue to have enough trees. As is the case, unfortunately, a lot of trees are lost to disease and pests. And so I think maybe in the public facilities element, it'll help us to further replace. And then I don't think we've gotten to it yet. I think it's later in my presentation, but there's also an implementation action for us to do a tree specimen ordinance that would help more with removals of private trees.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. It sounds like it'd be good to include it then in the public facilities element.
Yeah, wherever it gives us more power over the trees. So it seems like we cut a lot of trees down.
And then my other question is, in terms of with the debris basin operations, adding coordination policies, would that be very general, as in like the city, should coordinate with the county as opposed to more specific policies? Because my concern would be that that's such an evolving issue in terms of the sediment distribution and then the beach nourishment and all that. So I would hope that I would want it to be more stating that we should coordinate with the county, but not in any specific ways.
Agreed. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think we could definitely keep that general and just have it relate to sediment management, but not get into any of the real specifics of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. No speaker slips on safety.
I missed the box then.
Oh, we do have a speaker slip on safety. Welcome back. Was missing you.
Just one quick comment regarding the photovoltaic. Staff in their staff report offered that if the committee, told them to, they'd be able to add requirements beyond what's required by the building code and requirements for or goals for existing development. And we strongly encourage you to do that, to have staff come up with a recommendation for the strongest feasible requirements for an incentive, potential exploring possible incentives for existing development. There's a lot of roofs on not just residential, but on publicly held buildings, special district buildings, school district buildings. There's a lot of square footage that would be very beneficial to the community to have a little bit more, not energy independence, but energy resilience. And that is incredibly important here. So, thank you.
Anybody on Zoom?
We do. Patrick Crooks, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought I'd chime in as a resident here and chair of the tree advisory board. I first kind of question was if those comments from the county are available somewhere online, or if I should just reach out to Nick or Mindy to see if I can pull those together myself. But my guess there on the tree canopy is really there has been some studies. I attend a few workshops over the year, and I know Carpinteria is not doing horribly as far as the urban tree canopy is concerned, but again, replacing any trees or looking at available locations to really increase funding or grant opportunity there is something that the city ought to be looking at. But I think to kind of answer to Vice Mayor Solorzano, some of those wildfire risks, the urban heat severity, some of those things come out with increasing the urban canopy. And I think kind of the benchmark is, a 15 to 30% range. So really looking to see from an aerial view that the trees are covering a canopy, a percentage of the city, and kind of holding with some of the other cities that are around us. So I'd just like to look at them myself, but those are my comments, a little more specific to some of the tree canopy stuff.
Thank you.
If I may add, committee members, we did add a link now on our website that has the draft general plan. It now has a link to the full breadth of comments that we received from the public. So Mr. Crooks and anyone else should be able to find those comments. I think the tree comments were not from the county. I could be wrong. The county was talking about sediment, but you should be able to find it on there.
There are no other Zoom speakers.
Okay. All right, I'll bring it back. Any further comments? All right, we're going to proceed to public facilities.
Noise, yes.
Noise,
We had
sorry.
two key comments on noise.
Oh, yes, down there.
That live music in downtown was not analyzed, and that there should be mitigation to attenuate freeway and train noise. And guess what I'm going to say? I think we should analyze both of those issues in the EIR. There are a couple of general policies in the noise element kind of getting at these, but we can certainly take a closer look in the EIR process. And I'll hand it back to you for any questions.
Nope. Okay, Alan Coke. Yeah, I could have just added this to your other slip. So if you want to speak on other
Oh, no.
stuff, you don't need to fill out another.
I'm going to be excused after this one. On the noise elements here, I'm just a little bit confused with two tables there in the draft. N.2, acceptable noise levels, and then N.3, interior and exterior noise. Okay, one talks about land use category, land use type. I believe we need in the downtown T something with establishments that have live music. Okay, we have a number of them there. And we have a new one that's going to come in upstairs in Linden Square there. And there's really no decibel really defined there within those two tables. So that's my recommendation there. I don't know how to say it, restaurant with music or some commercial aspect that has with music, which I think is mostly all the people now who have that entertainment license agreement. But we need to put that in the general plan so that the license agreement lines up with the general plan. Thank you.
Okay, anybody on Zoom?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
All right, thank you. We'll close the public comment period.
I have something to say about the noise. That those live dance probably can be more reined in with the time that they're allowed to play. But I tell you, I can hear downtown in my house that loud music. It is so loud, I don't know how people sit there and, well, okay, that's an old people thing. But it's so loud. People in the neighborhood should be respected in terms of that noise and not poo-pooed just because they don't like it. And I'm one of them. So somehow, I would like that strengthened, or at least really examined.
Okay, anything else? All right, then we'll go on to public facilities.
Okay. On this element, concerns were raised about addressing homelessness, public safety, and police funding. And additional technical edits were submitted from the SBC Trails Council about trails that were mentioned in the element. And so staff can add context in this element, making clear that county sheriff does address homelessness as relates to safety. I'll also note that in our housing element, we have programs, as well as in the healthy communities policies, that aim to reduce homelessness in our city. And then staff intends to revise those trail descriptions that were given to us. And that's all that I have on this one.
Okay. All right, we'll open up the public comment period and, oh, Mike hasn't checked it. Anybody on Zoom?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay. Then if there's no further comments from the committee, we'll.
Oh, I have just one comment really quickly.
Okay.
For the trail descriptions, I think that sounds like a really good addition. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that staff can do.
Good. Okay, so we will go to the healthy community.
All right. On this one, we had a request to make the social justice its own element. We also got comments and corrections from APCD, Air Pollution Control, regarding a reference to an air quality plan and to further highlight some clean air programs. A housing trust fund was mentioned again in this element, along with additional support for unhoused community. And a comment asked that we address sources of wood smoke. And so I'll say on the social and environmental justice part, this was decided some years ago to not have a separate element for it, but to incorporate our environmental justice and social justice policies into mainly the healthy community element, but also, where appropriate, some other elements. So I would recommend not having us separate it out to be a separate element at this stage. We can, though, easily address the air quality corrections and clarifications. The housing fund and homelessness programs, again, I'll say that that's all tied up in the housing element. And so I think that's a better place for those. And then for the wood smoke impacts, I'm hesitant to try and establish policies right now, but this can be looked at in the air quality section of the EIR, and we can kind of establish what the impacts are and a potential policy to address it. And so I'll stop there if you have any questions.
No questions. We'll open the public comment period.
Keep looking, it's there.
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Just a very quick comment on the wood smoke topic. Since studying the ER is fine, that makes total sense. We would hope that out of that would come some policies. One of the biggest issues is State Beach, which is obviously outside the city's jurisdiction, and any policy would probably be over the form for the city to coordinate with the State Beach on methods for reducing wood smoke impacts to the community. And I think that's where we'll probably end up. If that's appropriate for something that would come out of the EIR, great. If there's something else needs to be put in the general plan to ensure that, then that should probably happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, bring it back to the committee for,
I do want to say I'm glad that to hear the social justice topic brought up, and it sounds like, I mean, and we know this from the general plan from looking through it ourselves, that I like that social justice points kind of weave through a lot of the elements, and so I like that they are sort of sprinkled throughout as opposed to just pulling them out, which I feel might make it seem like social justice is separate from these other elements, whereas it really is so important that it's part and parcel of them. So I appreciate Steph kind of explaining what the thought process was behind focusing on the healthy communities element, but also acknowledging that it's part of the other elements too in different ways.
okay. Coastal resiliency.
All right, so there was a lot of support from commenters for the future coastal adaptation overlay zone, as well as managed retreat planning. There was also a suggestion to add what is termed neighborhood scale adaptation planning. There was a concern, though, about takings and legal risks with doing that kind of zoning for sea level rise. There were some technical edits submitted to revise objective CR7, which is the objective to evaluate approaches to coastal adaptation, weighing benefits to costs, economic impacts, and appropriate use of public funds. And then number 5, the county suggested to us a new adaptation strategy to identify a location to store and stage sediment for beach nourishment or other adaptation projects. And so staff response on this is that we are definitely continuing to work with Coastal Commission staff on the overlay and the retreat planning. So that is an implementation item. If your committee would like, we would add policy language related to neighborhood scale adaptation strategies. To be specific there, I think a lot of the implementation would address that, but we could certainly add that language. We can add regarding the takings and risks. This is somewhat addressed in SB 272, so we could add an implementation action to meet SB 272 requirements. And we can clarify the cost-benefit part of Objective CR7, as well as include the mention of ecosystem impacts, which was suggested. And then, if you like, we can add a policy or action to study the feasibility of storing sediment, or there is a table in the coastal resiliency element, CR4, which has a table of potential actions, and that could be something that we add to that table to address the county's comment. And I will stop there.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I have just a quick question or comment. Forgive me if it's already in the plan, but can we have clear interim benchmarks on sea level rise, to keep these active?
I might be able to jump in quickly because I think I know where you're going with this. Things like benchmarks or like trigger points where when sea level rise gets to a certain point, that would trigger the city to take certain actions. Is that the sort of thing that you're thinking of here?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that this is it's a huge issue. And there's a lot of data out there. And it seems like something that every couple of years we should have an understanding of where we're at, and particularly how that's going to affect the beach neighborhood, obviously. Yeah.
Yearly update or after a big storm or something.
Yeah, I was thinking every 2 years, but
Makes sense to me.
I wonder if that could be part of, I know we receive reports on like emergency management or things like that. And so it feels like that would be something that would be really helpful to include in that, because I agree that is something that we should be kept top of mind on a regular basis. But I can't remember what presentation I'm thinking of.
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind on this topic is our local hazard mitigation plan has to be updated every 5 years. And so at the very least, coastal hazards are evaluated to some degree in that. And with each of those 5-year updates, obviously, they would be using updated data, or at least the best available data that we have. We don't currently have, any sort of sea level rise specific, annual update or something to that extent. Having something every year you probably wouldn't see much increase year over year, which is why, maybe like a 5-year check-in could be more helpful because the data might be a little bit more illustrative of, how much sea level rise has actually happened. But you are correct that we don't have any sort of policy in place specifically to update city decision makers on the progress of sea level rise.
Just to, and maybe Commissioner Van Antwerp, you're already zeroing in on this, but policy CR1E, commits the city to reviewing and updating at regular intervals and at a minimum every 10 years a sea level rise vulnerability assessment to incorporate emerging scientific understanding of sea level rise, potential changes to scenarios and projections, and updated information on coastal hazards, as well as to consider regional approaches to coastal resiliency building and adaptation planning efforts. So I'm not sure if that gets to what you're after, or you're looking for something more, or you want a tighter, recurring time frame, but that's what we've
Tighter
got in here right now.
Yeah.
Tighter.
Tighter recurring time frame. Yeah.
Any suggestions on what you would like to see there instead?
Well, I was thinking 2 years, but there's a lot of shifting, data out there.
Yeah,
You're more the expert.
Okay. I don't know offhand, maybe, so the first time we did our vulnerability assessment, we, the city, received a grant to go out and hire a consultant to do the analysis and do the work, and that may be an option going forward, as we pursue additional grants. But the state also does this, every so many years. I don't know exactly what their timeline is offhand, but maybe we can try to find that out, through the, was it Cosmos? The Cosmos model. That's the statewide, sort of planning effort, and maybe we, kind of hitch our recurring timeline to whatever the Cosmos timeline is on. And if it's every 5 years, maybe we, try to commit to the same.
So, yeah, we should find out what that is.
That'd be great.
I fear if we, otherwise make it too aggressive, like every 2 years, then these two are just going to be spending all their time chasing down grants every 2 years to pay for the next study.
All right, anything else? We'll open the public comment period and call up Mike Wondolowski.
Just one comment, sort of clarification on the objective CR7 that was mentioned in bullet 4 there in the staff report. It said that staff could include the criteria of ecosystem impacts if the committee agrees. I don't know if you need to tell them, yes, we agree, but please agree so ecosystem impacts is included in that list. Thanks.
I don't know. How much is it worth you?
I have a question.
Come on up.
Have you guys looked at the computer models for sea level change for Carpinteria?
I'm sure we have.
You do know what happens at 5 feet?
Yes.
Yep.
Downtown is flooded. So, and are you planning right now for 5 feet of sea level change as like an action item? Staff?
No.
The vulnerability assessment did model what that would look like, and the adaptation plan doesn't prescribe what we will do yet, but it prescribes a menu of different tools that, the city can look at. So that's as far as we've gotten so far is what's projected to potentially occur, what's sort of the, breadth of tools that are out there for adaptation strategies. And then the next step, which the general plan update and the follow-on coastal, what's it called, the coastal hazard overlay, would actually do is start to prescribe, which of those strategies we use at which kind of trigger points along the way. So as an example,
I
right,
understand what you're saying.
in the short term, it might be, kind of the Living Shoreline Project as something that helps, give us additional protection for 1 to 2 feet of sea level rise. And then
Right, I
beyond that,
understand.
right, they go to bigger, more.
Well, the point I'm trying to bring up is that the 5 foot level is happening. So right now, the city should be aggressively planning for what do you do to help protect at 5 feet?
And-
Because it's going to take you 10 or 20 years to do it, right? I'm assuming.
Right, and so what I'm saying is this is helping to set the groundwork to support that next effort.
Right, but just listening to the way it's being worded right now does not sound like it's an urgent item, as it should be, because it is going to be catastrophic otherwise if we don't have something actually being built in time, because things are going to change so rapidly. It's accelerating. There's exponential growth on this, and as soon as a couple big ice sheets break off in the Antarctica, you're going to see sea level change happening at a rate that will make our heads spin, you know what I mean? So, I just looked for my house, okay, what happens when, where do I get drowned? Luckily I'm way up, so I'm fine, but I just looked at downtown and man, it's gone at 5 feet. And 5 feet's going to be here in our lifetime, quickly. I think that people sometimes say, well, no one has said anything really bad yet. And it's because every single scientist, nobody wants to be the first guy to say, it's happening right now, it's already happened. Because nobody wants to get their head cut off, right? But that's the reality of we're in, and we should take the position as a community that it's here. The emergency is here right now. We need to act in an emergency way. It's not a steady way, it's not a 1 foot sea level change way, it's a minimum 5 foot change in everyone's lifetime who's sitting right here, guaranteed. I would say, 10, 15 years, things are going to start really moving quick. So I know you guys have lead times that are tremendous, and, Coastal Commission and everybody and their brother, and, look at Denmark. We have to build a dike out here, basically, is what we got to do if you want to save this town. And I don't know what it takes to build the dike, but I'm sure it's not a small project. It's not going to be planting seagrass and, sand dunes. We got some serious water coming our way, and I think that I just don't hear a sense of urgency about it, and I wish you guys would maybe take that approach to it, because you guys are the experts. I don't know how long it takes to get stuff to happen, but I'm assuming it takes a while, so we got to get busy. just my 2 cents worth, don't know anything about it besides just look at my little computer and went 5 feet, oh my God, downtown's gone. Turns all blue, Every foot you click it. It's pretty fun to do if you've never done it. All right, that's it.
So when we, when we originally were looking at this, we had the Ravel model, and they said, here it is. Is that still in use? Is that updatable, or, because the data we have here is from the state sea level rise guidance.
Right, so
Okay.
we do still have the Ravel model, and we do still currently use that at the city level, but the state has since passed us by with producing a more recent model that relies on, more recent science or better science.
Okay.
And so, that's where I was kind of going to with, I think, my response to Commissioner Van Antwerp's comment that, we can continue to pursue grants and try to, chase down money to do our own occasional updates to our vulnerability assessment. But in the meantime, we can also be relying on the state's modeling that maybe is occurring on a tighter turnaround than we can do on our own.
Yeah, okay.
One super quick thing that I'll add to this that might just be good to note is that the Ocean Protection Council, so the state sea level rise guidance, they do actually have a tide gauge in Santa Barbara. And so we actually are able to pull pretty local data from this statewide document, which is just good to know.
Good. All right. What else?
Okay, 2 more sections. First, we have.
I'm sorry, wait, were we
Oh,
done with that?
sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just wanted to make 2 quick comments. I like the idea of the city completing the sea level rise planning pursuant to SB 272. That sounded like a great idea. And then in terms of the sediment and beach nourishment point that the county had brought up, I like the idea of adding that to the table you mentioned, but not to including potential sediment staging grounds, since that's something I can see, needing to change potentially, or just too much of a moving target. So, but I like the idea of putting it in the table, the updates in the table. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
2 sections left. First is glossary and general public input. So there was a request that we have annual general plan review with community participation, a comment to replace the term inform the community with the term educate the community throughout. And then a request for us to define what major development means. And then finally, interest in protecting mature trees on private property. And so for staff review, I think this will suffice for the comment about annual review with public input. So every spring, we present an annual progress report pursuant to state law, and we bring that to city council and allow for public input. I will say making an amendment to the general plan once it's adopted is a heavy lift. So right now, everything's still in draft and we still have a process ahead of us, but once it's approved, we'll want to be we'll be sparingly amending the general plan. So we'll be picking and choosing what we do with that. This one is up to your committee if you would like us to change inform with the word educate. And then we can also add a definition of major development. We've noted, though, that this term means a lot of different things under different regulations. So Coastal Commission has their own version, and the state building has their own version. Flood has theirs. And then finally, the open space element already has an implementation action number 2, which directs the city to develop a specimen tree preservation ordinance, and that's that one I mentioned earlier. And this would regulate tree impacts on private property. So we do want to get that ordinance done as an implementation measure. And that's all I have on this one.
On number 2, replace inform and educate. Well, I think that's pretty moot, but it seems like when you say educate, you're talking about meetings and interaction, and informing is notifying. So I don't know. Depends on what it is. But I would say inform, leave it at that.
I was going to actually ask a related question. I was going to say, is there what's the difference in this context between inform and educate? Does that have something to do with planning, or is there?
We might have public comment on that, so maybe we'll get some clarification.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, we'll segue to public comment. And if you'd like to come up again, Mike.
Who's that guy?
Since Mindy just asked me to come up, sure, I'll be glad to comment on this. Our comment about inform versus educate is that providing information is one way, it's just part of education. And throwing information out there does not get the message in the public's head. That's one of the city's pillars or strategic goals, is to increase transparency and let people better understand what's going on in the city. Education generally involves information provision as well as some sort of assessment of the results and adaptation of the strategy of informing so that the results get better. That's education. And that's what we're all trying to do, is let the public know what's going on, not just throw it up on a website or in a letter and in fine print in the back page of the Coastal View. That would kind of count as informing, but it's not. That's all that comment's about. So please do direct staff to make that change. And the other one is the major redevelopment. It seems that because there's so many definitions in different contexts, that it seems like we're just kicking the can down the road and putting ourselves at risk of litigation or something, or putting our decision makers sitting right where you're sitting in a really tough situation, being told, oh, the threshold for major redevelopment has been met. The next speaker says, no, it hasn't. And there's no way to know which way it is. So that's where that comment came from. Our experts are here about what those thresholds might need to be and what the different contexts are. It doesn't need to be a make-work project to try to define it in detail for every context, but it seems like since some of these policies apply only to major redevelopment, it should be kind of clear what that is. And maybe it's laid out in ordinances outside the general plan. That's all fine. But that's kind of the genesis of the question.
Doesn't matter to me, as long as they get the information.
I think it makes sense. I think there's a difference.
On the major redevelopment or the inform educate?
Inform, educate,
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
I think my only concern with that one, though, is that knowing how lean our city staff runs to begin with, I would hate to give the expectation to the community that there's going to be regular, assessments and, circling back on when there might be times where there simply aren't enough staff to do that. And given everything else that we put on staff to follow up with and do, I wouldn't like to make that impression. I can see how maybe inform we might want to bump that up a little bit, but educate, it is a pretty powerful word, and it does imply that there's going to be there's already outreach being done, but that kind of assessment and refining aspect of it, that would be what I would be concerned about, making that part of the staff's bandwidth.
Would it make sense then for us to maybe meet with CVA and have a meet halfway suggestion on which ones seem better for inform and which ones seem appropriate for educate?
Yeah, or even, because I agree that I think inform can be changed, because given that the city's already doing a lot of outreach, but maybe if there's another word that's somewhere in between, but that is definitely stronger than inform.
We will get out our thesauruses and get to work.
You don't.
Yeah, I
need
think
to
when,
know.
when we were talking about this one internally, we thought, it may be sort of case by case specific or context specific that, we didn't have the time to go through and look for each place where it says inform, but, there may be some times where inform or an appropriate synonym is, sort of the right, target for, right intention for that policy, and others where maybe educate or an appropriate synonym for that is, the better fit for what we're trying to get across. And on the major redevelopment piece, we can take a look at where that comes up in the general plan. I don't know offhand, how often it comes up or where all it comes up, but, to Mindy's point, there are, kind of these subtle differences in how that term's defined depending on the regulatory agency or the situation. Most of them have something to do with like a threshold of replacing 50% or more of a structure, or doing improvements to the structure that exceed 50% of the current depreciated market value of the existing structure, something like that. So we just need to kind of go back and look at in what context was it used in the general plan here, and then that might help us and help us figure out what's the proper definition or definitions for use of that term in the general plan.
Okay. Anybody else from the public?
There are no Zoom hands raised.
Okay. And any further comments from the committee? All right, we'll go to the introduction.
Yes, introduction last, of course. So we had a request from a couple of people to change the community goal so that the last word pertains to residents instead of community. There was a suggestion to include a list of the city's biggest challenges to be faced over the lifetime of the plan. And then this has come up many times, as we've already talked about a few times tonight, but there are still requests that we consistently use shall instead of should in all policies unless outside agencies are involved in the policy. So first with the community goal, I'm showing here on this slide the exact changes that have been made to it compared to the one that's in our existing general plan. And the pertinent part at the end is that in the existing general plan, it says that these opportunities, et cetera, are for our citizens. And pre-COVID in the GPUC meetings, the decision was made to change it to for our community. And the comments call for it to be changed to for our residents. And so I'll let you think about that for a second, and we can come back to it. But I would ask what your committee prefers on that wording. And then on these other issues, so the issues and challenges that the city faces, that's something that does fluctuate over time. So it's kind of hard to add now that that we think would last over 20 years, especially half of the purpose of the plan is to address, to prevent challenges. But we do identify weaknesses and gaps in our service and in planning, and we do highlight the multi-year challenges. But I would say that other documents that the city continually updates, such as the budget, the work plans, the strategic plans, might better identify our biggest challenges from year to year. And then with the should versus shall, I mean, all the general plans in California have both should and shall. It is always something to grapple with, and as I said earlier, we can always look at any specific policies, like we are looking at view protections, but you really have to have some flexibility. If they were all shall, it just wouldn't be legally defensible, so we don't recommend making that blanket change. And so that's it for this one. And do you want me to leave it on the community goals slide, or?
Yeah, a quick question. Oh, is that okay?
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Question's fine.
So in terms of changing it to residents, is your understanding that whoever, making that change would be literally meaning only people who live in Carpinteria? Because it seems like that would include, that would exclude a lot of constituencies that the city does serve, like, visitors, people who work here, kids who sometimes go to school here, even if they don't live in Carp because their parent works here. So, I mean, is that your understanding, that that was the intention in suggesting residents?
That was how I interpreted it.
Okay. Just wanted to check. Thank you.
Well, on that note, I say relieve it at community.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm glad you took citizens out, because, hey, some people aren't. And, yeah, this community is for visitors, too. It's for people coming to your house and visiting, and kids going to school that don't live here. I mean, it's all of a piece. I don't think we should put residents there as a word.
Community is perfect.
Yeah. And I know Catherine was the one who wanted family-oriented residential neighborhoods to change, and I think that culturally diverse is very good. I like it.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open the public comment period. I'm going to have a slip, and you don't need to walk up here, from Alan Coke.
Tradition.
Lucky you, get some exercise.
Be coming?
I'm first.
You're
First
up.
and last.
You're up.
Just trying to keep up with Mike. This is the last, right? Okay. It's great to see in the community goal housing opportunities. Okay? I mean, that's the overarching goal that's driving the general plan, which is going to drive everything forward. That is great. Especially in light of that, I think it was last Monday's city council meeting, where they had the city's response to the grand jury, the county's grand jury, and a call to action. So that's great. We have it in our community goal. The next thing we have to do, and I'm looking at the two council members up there, we have to drive that through our strategic plan, where it's not there as a goal. Okay? It's only going to happen is if it's permeates throughout the city organization and structure. You have to revise the strategic plan as a goal on there. That's my recommendation. And then next thing is related to that housing goal. Within tonight's staff report, a lot has been done. We have a housing element. We already changed some zoning, okay? We reduced the fee structures, and we're doing a lot of good steps there. We hired two, I think the term is advanced planners, or? Long range, thank you, long range, okay? Which was approved by our city council. That's great. And they own it. That's part of their job description. But they can't do it alone. We have to. We talk here about a housing authority. The recommendation is for a housing committee, okay? That is driven and supported by the two long-range planners. But the committee includes leaders of this organization, of not this organization, this city, okay? We have to have a housing committee who's going to drive it, okay? And that has to be like people self-help housing on it. We have to have somebody from the finance banking industry, okay? Just I'm sure the staff could come up with a recommended structure of that, besides some council members. Okay, and obviously, Nick. Sorry, Nick. But again, I'm harping on that. For us to achieve our RENA numbers, it's not going to happen until there's a housing committee with a quarterly report that comes back to the city council. That's the only way change is going to happen. Okay, we've done a lot of good steps. We have an approved housing element plan. Check that off, okay? No more builders remedies, but we're here to address the burden of housing. I'm sure everybody saw I definitely saw it, September 10th, the News Hawk. Housing data reveals stark reality for renters in Santa Barbara County. Okay? I don't have to, we all know it's a priority. I'm just making suggestions here, looking to two council members to drive that process so that staff could get some support and help. And I think I can't remember when Mindy mentioned this about, okay, well, we're going to wait for a distressed property comes or something like that, or we rezone, for mixed use. Okay, well, let's go out aggressively and meet with these landowners and see if we could find one or two parcels. Okay, and then go talk to people self-housing. Has to be a committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
All right.
Al, I don't know if I had the box checked.
Oh, you had the box check?
I don't know if I did.
Oh, you put two checks, one over the other. Okay, got it. Okay, I see it. Sorry.
Wanted to comment on the residents versus community. As we were alluding to, the community is made up of residents, non-residents who work here, business owners who may not live here, and tourists. But the city is solely responsible to its residents. The residents make up the city. And that's the city and the city council's responsibility just to the residents. The interests of the residents need to be the sole criteria for any decisions the city makes. Attention to tourists and non-residents, that's great. And we invite tourism in the way that benefits the city and the city's residents. We invite businesses here in a way that helps the economy so that local residents can benefit from that. There's no goal, there's no benefit to residents for a non-resident business owner or developer to make a big profit and for the residents to be left holding the bag for the impacts. There's no benefit to local residents for excessive tourism or short-term rentals owned by 79% out of county property owners that takes our housing out of long-term housing, generates some TOT, and the profits leave the community. The city's responsibility is to its residents solely. That's why we recommended that change. Thank you.
Well, to that point, thank you. I hear you, but I disagree. I like to leave it at community. It's broader and more inclusive. That's my opinion.
I also just wanted to note we do have one Zoom commenter. Okay, Patrick O'Connor, go ahead.
Good evening again, everyone. Forgive me for leaving early. I just want to echo the comments from CBA. I really believe that we are here. The council is there and the commission is there to serve the residents. That should be our priority. All the other aspects of, what comes from non-resident property owners, non-resident businesses, I think Mike characterized pretty well, but we gotta take care of our own. Leave it as residents. Thanks.
I had also I had taken a look at that too. I saw I think it was Catherine's public comment. A lot. And not so much the residents. And when the pedal meets the metal, it really is the residents. So I have some conflicting views about that as well.
I agree with Jane. I think leaving it at community feels right to me because I think about the fact that we also support like small local business, right? A lot of those are not run by residents necessarily, but we really support those businesses, right? And those businesses give some jobs to people who live here, some jobs to people who don't live here, but that also is contributing to the fabric of our community. So I just think that it's unnecessarily exclusive to just say residents when by saying community, that includes residents as well. And I mean, residents would be the overwhelming population that is the focus. There are these other constituencies that I think that the city does serve, and I think that they contribute a lot to the city too, whether it's like teachers who don't live here but who spend, the majority of their days teaching our kids, right? Or again, small business owners who are trying to revitalize downtown. And so I can understand the concern for residents, but the idea of protecting our own always doesn't feel great to me, especially when the community we are very much interlaced with the different groups that spend time here in Carpinteria.
Right, and it doesn't preclude residents, it includes residents, so I think it's more inclusive. Plus, things like the art center, people don't necessarily live here that work there, and they contribute a great deal to this community. So that's where we stand.
Well, I'm going around and around on this one. Ultimately, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are concerned that sometimes we seem to do too much for somebody else and not for the residents, the people who live here. And so I understand that a lot. But I do think that the goal is right, but maybe, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'll stick with community. Myself.
I'm fine with that, if that's what you guys decide. But I did want to say one thing. Sorry to backtrack, but since we're on this slide, or not this slide, but the next one, I actually had this down, I think, in the another space, so I glossed over it. I'm sorry. I think that what we are missing in the general plan is affordable housing trust fund commitments. And I'm wondering if we could add an explicit implementation action in the land use, or I guess it would be, I wasn't sure which element it would be in, to establish a trust fund by a certain year and to track any displacement trends from, which we probably already do, but I think we need to do that. I think we need to put a stake in the ground.
In the general plan or in the housing element? I mean, I don't know.
I think it should be in the general plan.
Maybe you could open the gateway in the general plan and be more specific in the housing. I agree, we do need a way of building housing for our city without a developer involved.
A quick question for staff that's on that same topic. Of cities that have like a housing trust fund, are they cities as small as us, or are they generally bigger cities? How does that generally trend?
Yeah, good question.
I think either Mindy or Megan had done this research previously as part of the response to the grand jury and found only one other example in California of a city our size that has their own housing trust fund. And it was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of
Gotta
the,
be Santa Barbara, because Santa Barbara does have one.
they have one, but they're much larger than Carpinteria. So the only other city we could find that was our size that had their own housing trust fund was up in the Bay Area. It was Mill Valley or one of those that was, of our same population, but that has a lot more resources.
Well, and I asked that because I love the idea of wanting to have in the general plan more support for creating the kind of housing that we want, but I also am aware that we do have the housing element that's its own living document that we're working through as well. And so I'm not sure how it would fit in the general plan to be as prescriptive as to say we should establish a housing trust fund.
So from a legal standpoint, right, the housing element is one of the elements of the general plan. It just has its own, timeline for being developed on a more frequent cycle than the general plan. So that's why it's kind of handled separately. But I believe there are some commitments in the housing element already for us to, continue to pursue a housing trust fund. It may not be as binding right now as Commissioner Van Antwerp would, is campaigning for it to be. But there is, talk of continuing to look into it and explore it. I think, for a city like us, right, part of the challenge is not only how do we, staff and operate a housing trust fund, but also how do we fund it, right? And so it's kind of it's a two-part conundrum there in terms of, a housing trust fund without any revenue coming in to support it isn't going to be able to achieve much. So we really have to kind of solve both of those issues is, how do we staff it and operate it and run it, and then also how do we fund it? Is it pursuing grants? Is it identifying, dedicated revenue streams? Is it, courting the philanthropic community? Is it some combination of all those things?
Well, that's why I think it's important, too, that the city does participate in things like, is it the South Coast Affordable Housing, Santa Barbara County Affordable Housing Task Force? I was on that one. I'm not on that any longer, but when I first came on council, I was part of that. And I know there's other entities like that, countywide entities, that the city does have representation on. And the goal of that is to try to, from what I understand, is to get information, best practices, knowledge about the types of things that we can't afford to do on our own as a small city, right? And so it's kind of a strength in numbers sort of approach that I think, I hope people are aware of how much outreach the city does in those types of groups too.
And that's kind of more along the lines of, how we've been looking at it from a staff level is, right, it's not realistic probably for us to have our own housing trust fund, but is there a way for us to contract with, another provider that already does this and have them, do it for us as well, right? And say, we continue to feed seed money into it and say, hey, great, we've got some money saved up, help us now, facilitate a project and, and bring the right players together and secure the financing and whatever needs to be done to, to get a project off the ground. That's to me, seems like a more realistic path for our staff. And we kind of have a relationship like that already in place where we have a relationship with, is it the Santa Barbara County Housing Trust Fund? They help us administer our current down payment loan program. And so, maybe there's an opportunity to expand that relationship with them and have them take on this next role. Or if that's not quite what they do, then maybe we can, look into contracting with the city of Santa Barbara to help us with it, since we contract with them already for rental housing mediation, right? So it may be kind of just broadening those relationships that we have to help facilitate some of these things.
So one thing I thought in favor of this would be, because I saw the city of Santa Barbara do this, but for example, the Surfliner Inn is going to create a need for some low-income jobs. And so why shouldn't they, since they're creating this need, why shouldn't they pay into some sort of fund that helps us provide that low-income housing that project's going to generate? Or is there a way to do it the way you're suggesting, to accomplish that?
Well, to your point, Councilmember Clark, that's one of the ideas that we've also kicked around, not exclusively just, putting this on the Surfliner, but just for,
Right. No, of course.
for, new commercial development in general, right? That arguably it's generating, some additional need for staffing. Maybe with that comes some additional demand on housing, and therefore they ought to pay an in lieu fee, and we then have to go out and figure out, what the basis is for where we set that fee amount. And I think there's some other models of this having been done elsewhere, so we just need to dig into it and kind of understand the mechanics of it and what the, kind of risks and pitfalls are that we want to try to avoid, and, make sure that we have an objective basis for establishing an in lieu fee.
Yeah, there's just a lot of sort of stuff that we don't know. Like how much would it cost? How much would it really cost in staff time to manage this, and all the other questions about it? And I think if we go back to this housing committee thing, that would be a good way to follow up on stuff like that.
Yeah, in my mind, it's less about maybe the staff time, and in some cases, it may be about the actual staff know-how, right? I mean, we don't have anybody on staff that knows how to put together, financing for an affordable housing project, right?
Yeah.
That's above and beyond kind of what we're capable of doing. So I think we're either faced with having to bring in outside experts or contracting with somebody who already has those capabilities in-house.
Yeah.
When you look at even like the city of Santa Barbara, right? They have done a few of their own affordable housing projects, and the price tag on these things are astronomical. It comes out to like $1 million a unit. So a 50-unit affordable housing project is a $50 million project. And they're not just paying for that out of the piggy bank, they're paying, some of it with maybe cash that they have on hand, maybe they own the land and that's a portion of it. And then they're cobbling together a bunch of different, financing strategies and grants and stuff to cover the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's where these housing trust funds who do this stuff professionally, are way better situated to help us with that than us
and
reinventing the
we've
wheel.
actually, with using People's Self-Help Housing, I mean, they really have all that information. They know where to get the money, and they know how to manage these things. And so, I mean, that's worked well for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think another thing with that, though, is I know just recently there have been 2 projects that People's Self-Help has partnered with developers on, but that the community and the Council and Planning Commission, they're projects that they don't want to go forward, right? So I think People's Self-Help is still partnering on projects. It's just not where I think the community wants the projects to be. So there's that too, right? Like,
Well, yeah.
we want to have it, exactly the way we want, and we
Which ones
can't
you're
always.
talking about.
Well, the initial tea time one, and then also for the Shaft property.
I don't think-
I'm just, those are just examples that
Yeah,
People's
no,
Self-Help is, we talk about People's Self-Help a lot, and it's important to note when they are trying to get this housing in, and they're not getting support from the community, maybe for good reason, right? But
I think
it's,
there's other
regardless,
reasons.
there's,
It's
that's
not because
there.
we don't like affordable housing. It's
I know, but
other
it
reasons.
seems like a lot of people want it in a very specific place, which they don't know, and then we end up back here talking about how there's no affordable housing. At some point, there have to be compromises made in terms of where that housing is going to go. And I'm not saying in terms of
Well, I
any
think
existing
everybody
parcels,
liked
but
the Bluffs one. Nobody didn't like the Bluffs thing that was proposed.
nobody did. Which one?
Yeah, right, the affordable housing that was proposed by People's Self-Help Housing
Mm-hmm.
for the Bluffs, people liked that.
But not the project it was part of, right?
Right.
So, I mean, but those are the
Well,
compromises that have to
Yeah,
be
no,
made
but I mean, there's
sometimes.
still, maybe
Too
there's
big a
still
price.
opportunity to do that there somehow.
Yeah, but it's just interesting. I just feel like I bring it up because I feel like this, when we talk about housing in Carpinteria, that's what makes it so complicated is for very good, understandable reasons, we want housing to not go in certain areas, and I get that and I agree, right? But then it's like, okay, but then we have to deal with the consequences of that, which is that we need affordable housing. And so I just wanted to just get that out there.
No, I think that's a good location for affordable housing, but people just couldn't stomach the hotel next to it.
Yeah, that
That's
was
my
it.
guess.
That was it, yes.
What if we were to include,
You could still have affordable housing there. Sorry.
no, sorry. What if we were to include a timeline maybe not a timeline, but some kind of a implementation trigger in the GPU so that we're not just deferring to the housing element, because it seems like we,
Well, the housing element
something.
has stronger timelines.
okay,
It has to be updated pretty soon again, and we have to meet all of the programs. Affordable Housing Trust Fund is mentioned 16 times in the housing policies as something that is for us to continue to work on. So I would say it is there, it's addressed, and it is part of the general plan. If anything, it's already in effect and already something we need to be working on, as opposed to something that might get adopted a year or 2 years from now. So it's there.
Speaking of self-help housing, I don't know if you knew Jeanette Duncan, who founded it or who was the executive director. She was fantastic, and she died recently. But my goodness, I loved her. And she did a lot of good for this community. So just thought I'd say that.
Okay, what else have we got?
All right, we have scheduled our next one, and the reason we want to have one next month is because we got substantial comments from Coastal Commission staff, and a lot of it does not overlap with what we've talked about today. So we are meeting with Coastal Commission staff over the next week or so, and hoping to refine what would be important to bring back to your committee in terms of their requested changes. So we think that's worth, at least tentatively for right now, scheduling one more GPUC meeting for the third Monday in October, which is October 20th. Do any of you know for sure that you would not be available that day?
I'm available that day, definitely.
I'm available.
Yes, I'll be here.
All right, quorum. And that's it for us.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again, staff, for just going through all of those elements. Like, it was such a fine-tooth comb. Really appreciate you drawing out the finer aspects of it. Thank you for guiding us through it.
Yeah, thanks to staff and also to the public for providing input.
Yes, thanks for everybody who stuck around.
A lot of good ideas.
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing further, we will be adjourning at 9:04 or 5.